You ready to go? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our annual Spring into Action event being held here in Ottawa at the amazing Carpenters Hall out in Kanata. This is our second year having our event here, and we're really excited to get the day off to a good start. So myself and Sean McKinney, President of the Ottawa and District Labour Council, we will be hosting today. And we'll get started by having Sean do the land acknowledgement.
Okay, thank you, Laura. We acknowledge the gift of being on unceded Anishinaabe Algonquin territory. We recognize the two closest Algonquin First Nation communities, Kitigan-Zibi and Algonquins of Pikwanigan. We also recognize that Ottawa is a gathering place for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis from across Canada. This land acknowledgement commits us to the original relationship we are building together based on friendship, peace, and mutual respect. We are committed to working towards meaningful reconciliation and collaboration with the host Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, urban Indigenous communities, and organizations. We recognize and respect the inherent Indigenous right to self-determination and to self-government. Together, we aim to address both emerging and systemic issues and support Indigenous-led approaches.
Thank you, Sean. So my name is Laura Lozansky, and I am the chair of the local advisory committee for the Eastern Region OCAL Clinic, which spans Eastern Ontario, and we have 7 labor councils in our catchment area. And along with Sean McKinney, will be your host for today. For the past few years, we've worked very closely with the Ottawa District Labour Council. They've been our major partner to organize, fund, and host the events, which we used to have them in person. We went hybrid during COVID, but we're now continuing the hybrid because it seems to be a good working model. So I'd like to take a few moments to introduce our LOC board members. Myself, Laura Lozansky, I'm the chair. Of course, Sean is here as the ODLC president from Ottawa. Paul LaHaye from OPSU from the Algonquin College. Ben Trentlinger from Renfrew Labour Council. And some of our fabulous OCAL staff, without which we couldn't not just host this event, but service workers in their workplaces across the province. So Kimberly O'Connell, who's the Eastern Region Executive Director, is here. Cheryl Baker, our Client Service Coordinator. Holly Houston, Occupational Health Coordinator. Tony Lee, Information Technology. And Tracy Edwards, an Occupational Health and Safety Occupational Nurse, is here. And then online, we have Leanne Feldman from ETFO, who's the vice chair of the committee. David Chesney, president and chair of the board from OCAL and also from CUPE, and Caitlin Woodcock. Erin Smith is here from CUPE, she's a WSIB officer. Olivier Melanson, CUPE Young Worker. Debbie Scrivens, community representative. Anya Benacourt Del Silva, CUPE 503 and Health and Safety Coordinator. Jeff Leeper, City Councilor. Louise Langton, Cornwall District Labour Council. Nancy Ripley from the Leeds and Grenville Labour Council in Brockville. And Chris Gervais from the Workers' Health and Safety Center. So we're going to begin with having David Chesney, who is the president of OCAL provincially and chair of OCAL's board of directors, say a few words. David has played a pivotal role in ensuring that OCAL, its clinics, its staff, and LOCs are engaged and supported to carry out their very important work on behalf of workers in their workplaces. And David, we'd like you to say a few words of welcome to people.
David's unable to get on right now, so we can keep going. And
okay. Okay, so I guess David's not able to get on right now, but he'll come on later. So I'm just going to start with some housekeeping, and then we'll get on to our really great presentations. So first of all, for those of you that are in the room, there are 2 exits, one there, and the bathrooms are through the door on under this exit here. Those of you at home, please take, or at work, if you're working virtually, please take the time to get up and move around. For WebEx, if you're having any issues or questions, please contact Kate Woodcote through the chat. Please note that the session will be recorded. And if you're having any bandwidth issues, please feel free to turn your camera off. You will be muted during the presentations, and then the mute will be turned off for questions. The chat will be open 5 minutes prior to the end of each speaker's presentation for questions. You will also have the option to raise your hand if you prefer. I'll be monitoring the timing as we go along, and you should have received a link for a post-session evaluation. I will remind you again at the end, but this is really important. Every year when we do this, we do an evaluation to see how people enjoyed the event, but also looking for topics for the next year's event. So please make sure you fill that out, okay? Finally, there's a bio break for 10 minutes at 9:55 and an additional refreshment break at 11:35 a.m. And please be back promptly at 12:20 p.m. for the next guest speakers. So now I would like to introduce Kimberly O'Connell, the Executive Director of our Eastern Region OCAL Clinic. Kimberly brings valuable knowledge, guidance, and expertise to our LOC, our Local Outreach Committee. Her energy and support always keeps us focused and looking for creative ways to help the clinic support the Eastern Region catchment area.
Thanks, Laura, and everyone. I am louder than Laura. How's the sound for folks online and in the room? Great. I think I don't need a mic for the people in the room. But we're so happy to have folks join us today for our annual Spring into Action. I did want to mention that we love this event because it sort of leads us into follows us from our long winter into our spring and weather, and also we'd like to promote our day of mourning events by the end of the month. So I really appreciate your joining us. So we're planting the seeds in the rain for the prevention to avoid, though we celebrate the loss, we want less of it. So I really appreciate all that you all do. Because every single person in this room is working towards that prevention effort. Workers, consultants, health and safety system partners, and you are very appreciated. So I will get on to business and introduce our first speaker. We are trying to get David to give you the better welcome than I would have. Chezzy, our president. And chair of our board, but we are having a few technical difficulties getting him online. So we will pop him in whenever we can achieve that. We'll go ahead with our first presentation, and it delves into the vital role of ergonomics in manual material handling, highlighting impact on injury prevention and workplace efficiency. Daryl Stevenson, Dr. Daryl Stevenson, it graduated from the University of Windsor in 2008 with an honors Bachelor of Science degree in human kinetics and specialization in the field of movement science. In 2011, he graduated from the University of Windsor with a master's degree in the field of exercise physiology. Daryl also played professional football in the Canadian Football League from 2008 to 2013, winning the Grey Cup with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in 2013. In 2018, he graduated from Western University with a PhD in health and rehab sciences, where he researched the underreporting of concussions in Canadian Football League players. So Daryl is recognized as a Canadian Certified Professional Ergonomist through the Canadian College for the Certification of Professional Ergonomists, and is a member of ACE, or the Association of Canadian Ergonomists. Daryl worked as an ergonomist for over 10 years and has been with OCAL with us, the Occupational Health clinics for Ontario workers since 2018. He's also an adjunct professor for the Department of Health Sciences at Western University. And he'll be joining us today to discuss ergonomics and manual material handling, which is one of the priority items this year for the ministry. So thanks, Daryl. Over to you.
Okay, great. Thank you. And you can hear me and you can see my presentation okay? I think, yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks a lot, Kimberly. And thanks for inviting me to be here and to speak today. And so again, I'm going to be talking about ergonomics and manual materials handling. So today's presentation is going to cover some key topics related to musculoskeletal disorders, so MSDs, which I'll refer to it for the rest of the presentation. I'm going to start with an introduction to MSDs, discussing the causes and the impact, and then I'm going to explore how to recognize and control MSD hazards in the workplace, particularly with moving materials and lifting. I'm also going to dive into some handling techniques which can help reduce the risk. And then I'm going to go over quickly how to assess and manage the risk to prevent MSDs from occurring and some different tools that we have to do that. So MSDs are painful conditions that affect muscles, tendons, and nerves. And they result from repetitive motions, awkward postures, or sustained forces that can lead to gradual wear and tear on the musculoskeletal system. They're also called different things you might have heard: repetitive strain injuries, cumulative trauma disorders, musculoskeletal disorders, MSKs, they're referred to, sprains and strains, or just an injury. So some of the most commonly injured areas for manual materials handling activities are going to be the lower back, and that's a big focus for us, particularly. The lower back is highly vulnerable to injury, especially from heavy lifting using poor posture, and the vertebral disc disorders that are a major concern here. Tendons are also injured. The connecting tissue from muscles to bones, they're prone to strain and inflammation due to repetitive or sudden movements, especially bending or lifting tasks, and particularly the wrist and the shoulder. The repetitive and forceful gripping and awkward postures and positions, a lot of lifting and pushing can lead to these tendonitis or sprains in the wrist and shoulder. So just to briefly go over some of the anatomy here for the back. The spine is divided into 4 main sections, and each part plays a crucial role in supporting the body. And we focus here today on the lumbar vertebrae, which are located in the lower back. And they're particularly important because these vertebrae are larger compared to the ones above. And this is because they are designed to bear much of the body's weight and handle the stresses from things like lifting, bending, and twisting motions. So they end up being the ones taking a lot of the brunt force and end up being the most injured for that reason. Sorry, we also have the ligaments in the spine that connect the bones to the back there. So then we have the, oops, cutting out. So between each vertebrae in the spine are intervertebral discs, and often these are referred to as the spine's shock absorbers. So these discs help cushion and protect the vertebrae by absorbing an impact from the movement and pressure. So when large forces or awkward postures act on these discs, injuries can occur. And this can happen suddenly or may develop gradually over time. So it's, looking at these pictures, I'm going to be bringing up other pictures of bending and how to lift. And with the spine, keep in mind what your spine's doing as you're lifting in relation to pictures like that. So MSDs can develop gradually over time. And it's crucial to be proactive in addressing the potential issues before they escalate. And that's the most important thing. And if we look here at this picture, these 3 pictures here, we can see it, it's gradually gets worse and worse. It starts with some pain, grows into the point where it can potentially cause an injury if nothing is done about it. So it's very important to be proactive. As soon as you start to feel pain, what I typically see as an ergonomist, I go in and somebody's had pain for a long time, then they'll go and they'll go see a physio, or they'll see their doctor, maybe they'll start getting massages. And then after about a year, I get called in and we look at their workstation, and it's something in the workstation that's causing that pain. So they're just trying to, trying to deal with it and trying to manage it through reducing the pain, but really it's never going to go away because we haven't addressed the actual problem. So very important. So if you see coworkers starting to do things like reporting pain or discomfort, taking more frequent breaks to rest and recover, or shaking their hands or body parts to relieve tension, or wearing additional products, maybe they start wearing a back brace, things like that, those can be early indicators that something needs to be done about the job. MSDs are influenced by a variety of risk factors, and these often act in combination rather than isolation. And these factors can increase the likelihood of injury and strain. So they don't act alone, they combine and create a higher risk for MSDs. So being aware of all these factors is very important. And typically, you hear a lot about high forces, reducing the weight of things, or reducing the repetition, bringing in more rest time. But really, it's best to try to focus on all of these if you can, as much as possible. Think of reducing them all, because as this picture kind of shows, they all do blend together to create that risk for injury. So force is a key one, and it's going to come in two forms. So there's the external force that's going to be applied to the body by the outside object. So for example, the weight of an object being held, so maybe that shovel with the snow on the end of it. And then there's that internal response in your body. So the force is generated by the muscles in response to the task demands. So maybe holding up the shoulder and neck to support the arms, force required by the shoulder and neck to support the arms during lifting and holding, which can lead to fatigue or strain over time. Yeah, single high load injury is pretty straightforward. It occurs when the extremely high force is applied to the body in a short period of time, which is going to overwhelm the body's ability to withstand the load, going over that failure tolerance and causing a quick injury. Repetition is talked about in many different ways, and sometimes we even stop using the word repetitive and start talking more about a lack of rest time. So repetition refers to performing the same or similar movements in a task over a given period of time, often by the same muscle group. When movements are repeated, the muscles are under continuous strain, which requires greater recovery time to prevent injury and fatigue. And without proper rest and recovery, this repetitive stress can lead to overuse injuries. So again, it's very important to create those rest breaks. As we can see here in this picture, as you're applying that constant repetitive load, that tissue tolerance is going to be reduced and down to a point where it gets close to being toward that failure area. So adding in these rest breaks will allow you to recover as you work there. So this highlights why recovery time is just as important as activity time when thinking about it and designing jobs or adjusting jobs. So neutral postures refer to a position that minimizes stress on the body by aligning the muscles, the joints, and bones in their most natural state. And this is going to be the safest and most efficient position to work in, as it's going to reduce strain on the muscles, the ligaments, and tendons, and allow them to function optimally. Maintaining neutral postures throughout the day helps prevent fatigue, discomfort, and MSD injuries. So really, we're trying to stay in those neutral postures and avoid these awkward postures. So awkward postures can significantly increase the risk of injury by forcing the body into these unnatural positions. When we're in these positions, the body operates much less efficiently. And you can see that with these two hand pictures over here, just looking at the wrist posture. If the wrist is straight in that bottom right picture there, you get that 100% strength in it. But as soon as you work outside of that, if you're trying to hold that posture all the way to the bottom there, you're going to have 45% of your full strength. So all these activities that you're doing are going to take more effort and require more rest time and potentially lead more to injury. So trying to design jobs where you can work in these neutral postures is very important. And then yourself as a worker, when you're working, these are one of the things that you can try to control. Ideally, you'd want to design the job so that the worker can work in neutral postures. But there's also a lot of jobs out there that I've seen where you can kind of take control of it yourself. And so something like, I do a lot of work with dentists and dental hygienists and dental assistants. And one thing they really talk about is, some patients don't want to lie all the way back down, or some patients don't want to do this or that. And so, sorry, I'm seeing questions here. Yeah, so what we talk a lot about is, they're only there for one session every, 6 months or so, a year. But you're there all day, every day. So the more you can kind of try to talk them into, try to lay back, so I can get in a good posture to work, and trying not to just compensate the whole time can help you out in the long run. Okay, so here's just some general ideas of awkward postures that you might get into, and try to avoid those. So some things are simple. I do some office assessments, and if the monitor is just too far over to one side, you're going to be working with your head turned all day long. Little things like that can add up over time, and just trying to say, as I'm working, am I working in these neutral postures? And if I'm not, how can I do something about it? So static postures or static contractions occur when a person holds the same position for a long period of time. When this happens, the blood flow to the muscles is going to be reduced, preventing them from getting more oxygen and nutrients that they need to function properly. So this lack of circulation can lead to early onset of fatigue, discomfort, and making it harder to maintain the posture to perform the task effectively. And over time, these static postures can contribute to strain and other MSD issues. Okay, so holding these static postures for extended periods can gradually reduce the body's failure tolerance, much like repetitive movements. And therefore, it's essential to change positions frequently, and to take breaks, and to give the muscles a chance to recover, and to avoid the negative effects of static postures. And we talk a lot about job rotation, and you hear that quite often. And one thing to keep in mind with that, if you're going to be changing to a different job to try to alleviate positions or muscles, we want to make sure that the job isn't using the same muscles and the same muscle groups that you're using when you're doing the previous job. So you don't want to, have a high upper extremity intense work and go move on to another job with the same demands on it. You want to try to think about not so much job rotation, but muscle use rotation, and making sure that you're using different body parts in those different jobs to give those ones a rest. Contact stress is important to think about, and this occurs when the body tissues become in direct contact with hard or sharp objects, resulting in increased pressure on those areas. And this pressure affects the underlying tendons and nerves, which is going to reduce the blood flow to the affected areas. And over time, this can lead to discomfort and pain and even tissue damage. And one thing that I see quite often with this, it's not so much that the contact stress is going to end up causing the injury, but avoiding the contact stress is what causes some pain. So even in the office picture there where the person's typing, what that person would likely end up doing is just holding up their arms with their shoulders, kind of flexing their shoulders and elevating their arms to avoid that contact stress. So, having these points of contact stress will create potentially awkward postures or static contractions throughout the workday to avoid them. So that's why they're important as well. Okay, I won't go into this too much because Andre is going to be talking quite a bit about this, but extreme temperatures, so cold, the muscles and tendons become less flexible, blood circulation is reduced in arms and hands, and then if you're too hot, it's going to impose strain on the body, increases dehydration and things like that. Yep, that's as much as I'll go into that. Psychosocial hazards. So these can significantly impact the employee's well-being and contribute to MSDs. So some key hazards are things like work demands, the work organization, work values, work relationships, work-life balance, and offensive behaviors. And what happens is these factors can lead to stress and burnout, which has been shown to make people more tense in the workplace, more stressed, and they end up doing things with more force throughout the day. So they've even done studies where they look at people who are typing, and if they're more stressed, they'll be hitting the keys harder and they'll be more tense. So it's like having these little static contractions throughout the day in your body. You're not getting as much rest and you're using more force. So it's been shown that these psychosocial hazards have a connection to MSDs and increasing the MSD risk. So again, thinking that big holistic effect, trying to reduce all of these is going to be the most beneficial in the long run. And then how do we go about doing these? So to control for the hazards in manual materials handling, we apply the hierarchy of controls, hopefully, and we start with the most effective strategies. So eliminating the hazard, removing the hazardous task or process entirely if possible, really thinking about it from that way, or trying to replace it or substitute it is the next step with a safer one, such as using maybe lighter materials. We can try to isolate from the hazard, use barriers or automation in that one area that's more risky, more hazardous, to prevent exposure to the hazard. Okay, then we get down to things like training for the job rotation, and policies that can affect how much somebody's doing the job. Providing that training, some rotating the tasks, or implementing clear policies. And then we have personal protective equipment, and this is the last resort, and you use equipment like gloves or back supports to reduce the exposure and the forces that they're taking. And I'm going to be talking a bit next about lifting techniques, and I will say right away that these are down to the bottom of the list here. So, you know, we really want to think about trying to replace, eliminate, or isolate from the hazard first before we get into these training techniques. I see these kind of as a last resort. You have to do this job. Let's do it as safe as possible. But ideally, we should be trying to eliminate the hazards from the job itself. So can lifting techniques make a difference? Yes, they can. And I'm going to start this conversation. Usually I go through this and I talk a lot about the safe lifting and how to do, you know, the proper techniques for heavier lifts. But it usually gets brought up in the chat, and at the end of this, I go over some alternative lifting techniques that you'll do. And I will start out by saying that, you know, you're not always going to be doing a perfect lift. And especially if you have things like light weights, or you've been working somewhere for, you know, a long time, and people get used to doing things certain ways. And, you know, I'm not trying to tell everyone to go in and every time you have to pick a piece, you know, a 1 pound thing off the ground, that you have to do a perfect squat every time. You know, people bring up that would make them more tired, things like that. And there is some discussion around if somebody's accustomed and their body's used to doing things certain ways and that works for their body, as long as it's not super awkward and dangerous positions, then it's okay for them to do. But if you are lifting a new object, designing a new task, or doing anything heavy, it is important to think about these techniques. Much like anyone that's doing, you know, weightlifting or Olympic lifting and things like that, they really focus on their technique to make sure that they're using their body the most efficient ways and they're reducing the risk of injury as best as they can. So keep that in mind as we go through these. So lifting and carrying items can pose a risk to your back's health, so your whole body, but mainly your back and lower back. And these safe lifting principles can help protect your back and keep you comfortable. So we use this back acronym. So keep your back straight, avoid twisting, keep the items close to your body, and keep them smooth movements. So again, thinking about the discs in your back, when the back is straight, the discs in your spine can handle larger loads without the risk of injury. To maintain a neutral spine position, always try to bend at the knees and hips, not the waist. And this ensures proper alignment and reduces the strain on the back. So we can see here, looking at the pictures of the back, you want to try to avoid that curved back, that C kind of position in your back, and try to maintain that S in your back. So by bending at the knees and the hips, you can keep your back more aligned. Okay, and these are just a visualization of the different ways forces can affect the back. And trying to think about maintaining a neutral spine as you work to avoid some of these different forces that can act on the back and the discs. So a big one is going to be avoiding twisting, and the discs are a lot weaker when lifting and twisting. Always try to pivot your feet instead of twisting your torso when moving objects, and this ensures that the body's the proper body mechanics and reduces the strain on the back. So we can see here in this picture, she's twisting her back every time she's transferring over to that table there. And we want to try to avoid that. So one technique, especially if you're lifting something heavy, is to pick it up and then to just use your feet. Move with your feet, keep your hips and your back aligned, and try not to twist it all, and try to move your whole body almost like a robot, but pivoting with your feet instead of your back. Always thinking about your back and how much use it's taking. And when lifting with your back joints act as a fulcrum, and your muscles counterbalance the weight of the object. So the further away the object is from your body, the more stress is going to be placed on your back. So to reduce this stress, try to keep the object as close to your body as possible. Also try to raise the center of gravity of the object to reduce the torque or force required to lift it. So we can see here in this picture to the right, we have some lifting zones where often that green zone in the middle, they call it the power zone. I've heard that before. But basically what we're trying to do is design jobs and work as much as we can, especially with moving materials, in that green zone or those yellow ones, but trying to avoid working in those extreme zones, which are going to cause a lot more stress with the same amount of weight on your back. Okay, and then we also always want to keep your movement smooth when lifting. So try to avoid sudden, forceful movements as they increase the risk of strain on the discs. And similarly, do not release the force abruptly. Don't just drop the weight, as it can cause injury as well. If lifting with a partner, make sure to use clear communication so that there's no difference in the levels that you're lifting to ensure a smooth, coordinated movement. So manual materials handling is often influenced by a lot of factors, such as the weight of the object, the vertical travel distance, the horizontal distance, the object dimensions, and the lifting techniques. The heavier weights are going to increase the difficulty of lifting, and sometimes this raises the risk of using poor technique. So really thinking about, especially if it's heavy or if it's new or you don't really know, kind of go up and test the weight and think about getting in a good position before lifting. Try to use things like lifting aids or get help from a partner if it's too heavy, and apply proper lifting techniques and communicate together. The vertical distance also affects the task difficulty, increasing the reaching and risk. So it's important to try to avoid overhead work and store objects between the knuckle and chest level. Especially any heavy objects, you don't want to store too high or too low. Okay, and then increase the horizontal distance from your torso requires increasing the horizontal distance, requires more effort. So while larger or unbalanced objects make lifting harder, so to reduce strain, keep the loads balanced, minimize the horizontal distance, and avoid any single-handed lifting if possible. Your grip plays a big role as well. So poor grip or coupling can further increase the injury risk. Always aim for a firm, secure grip. Additionally, be cautious with slippery objects or pinch grips and awkwardly shaped items. Gloves should be suited for the task, and that's an important one too. Gloves, it's important to get gloves that fit. Working in a bigger size glove is going to cause you to increase your grip strength to maintain any sort of grip on it. Even more so, really thick gloves that we often see, those increase the grip strength as well because you have to squeeze harder to maintain a strong grip. So making sure that your gloves are not too thick, they're the right gloves for the tasks, they have good grip on the outside of them for the object that you're lifting, and that it's not doing anything to make things harder on yourself. Okay, there's also many tools out there that can add to your grip for different objects. And I'm not gonna, there's lots of different ones out there, and it's important to kind of look around and see if any of these can be useful for the tasks that you're doing. One thing I will say about that though is that ergonomics as a term is not protected, and anyone can make any object. I can make a ball chair and say it's a ergonomic chair. It's not a protected term. So really doing your homework, trying to find other people that may have used it in your industry isn't a good one, or asking ergonomists what they think about the object or the tool, and trying to make a good decision about that. But there are some good ideas out there and some good tools that can help you lift different objects. So just quickly to go over controlling for vibration. Try to report poorly maintained equipment to your supervisor. Ensure good suspension systems, correct tire pressure when using forklifts and different vehicles to move. Make sure your seat has hydraulic dampers and shock absorbers to adjust to your weight and your height. Making sure you're set up correctly is very important. Try to slow down when driving over potholes or rough terrain. Take breaks and get out of the vehicle every hour to stand, stretch, and give your body a break from vibration. You also want to adjust your seat quite often to deal with the vibration in different ways. And then wear PPE when necessary to reduce the vibration. So there are some alternative lifting techniques, and I'll show 3 here. And it's actually Andre who's doing the next presentation, who's in these videos here. In some situations, the standard lifting technique may not be feasible due to the object or the task at hand. In these cases, alternative lifting techniques can be used to reduce the strain and prevent injury. So we're going to watch these 3 videos here.
Use the partial squat lift for small light objects with handles close to knee height. Stand with the object close to your side.
Place your feet shoulder width apart. Keep your back straight. Push your buttocks out and slowly lower yourself down to reach the object's handles. Prepare for the lift. Grasp the object and look forward. Lift upwards following your head and shoulders. Lift by extending your legs with your back straight, your buttocks out, and breathe out as you lift. Use the partial squat lift. This lift is used for bulky or awkward items at floor level. Put one foot next to the object. Keep your back straight, push your buttocks out and slowly lower yourself down onto one knee. For support as you lower yourself down, put one hand on a stool or on your thigh for support. Position the object close to the knee on the ground. Grasp the object firmly with both hands. Slide the object from the knee on the ground to mid-thigh. Keep your head forward, your back straight, and your buttocks out, and lift the object onto the opposite thigh. Put both of your forearms under the object, with your palms facing upwards, and hug the object to your stomach and chest. Prepare for the lift looking forward. Lift upwards following your head and shoulders. Hold the load close to your body. Lift by extending your legs with your back straight, your buttocks out, and breathe out as you lift.
And these videos are on our YouTube, and there's a bunch more of them. I'm showing 3 of them here, but there are more of them. So if you wanted to use those for your workplace, they are on our YouTube channel. And you can see here with this technique, the tripod lift, what he's doing at the start here, by sliding it up his knee, he's raising the center of gravity of the object, again, before doing the actual full lift and squat up, and getting it into that power position before he does the lift there.
This lift is appropriate for light objects that can be lifted with one hand. Place hand near the edge of a fixed surface if possible, to support your upper body during the lift. Keep your back straight and raise one leg as you lean down to pick up the object. The weight of your leg will counterbalance the weight of your upper body. Grasp the object firmly. Prepare for the lift. Look forward. Keep your leg raised as you start the lift. To lift, keep your back straight and breathe out. This lift is...
Okay, and so I'll get into some pushing and pulling. So when lifting isn't an option, we can use tools like hand carts or dollies to push and pull loads. It's important to consider human factors like things like height, the strength, the age, along with the task demands. Things like the distance, the force, the duration. The equipment design is going to matter, the handle height, the wheel type, stability to affect performance. And then lastly, you also want to check the floor conditions and see what they are. Are we pushing over a carpet? Is it slippery? Is there slopes? And how can we avoid accidents? To protect your back, really try to move your feet, avoid twisting again, keep the load close to your body. A lot of the same principles apply, and maintain those neutral postures. If the load is too heavy, use a wheelbarrow, a dolly, or cart to stay safe. So to reduce strain, try to minimize the distance you're going to be pushing or pulling, relocating materials efficiently if possible. Also try to avoid pushing carts through crowded areas to prevent accidents. And whenever possible, eliminate pushing and pulling by using tools like conveyors, power trucks, lift tables, or slides to move loads more safely and efficiency. And I know I've seen some hospitals that use those pull carts there that they can attach multiple carts to. If they have policies where if they have to go down a long hallway, they have to use the cart and attach objects to it. So to reduce the force when pushing or pulling, improve your grip and reduce the load size. Take multiple trips as needed. Obviously, you don't want to take. There's a trade-off taking too many trips and making it too light or making it too heavy, but somewhere in the middle. And there's some tools at the end that I describe, the Liberty Mutual tables that can help you kind of decide that. Use dollies with low center of gravity and a wide wheelbase to improve stability and control. Ensure preventative maintenance is completed on the carts for smoother movement, making sure the wheels aren't full of clutter. A bigger wheelbase also helps. Finally, keep floors in good condition by eliminating bumps and cracks, and always try to wear proper gripping shoes for better traction. To optimize pulling and pushing tasks, try to eliminate one-handed movements where possible and always use both hands for better control and stability. Provide adjustable handle heights. Will accommodate more employees. And a good one is just those long vertical ones that we see in that top right picture, which allow different height workers to use it efficiently and in neutral postures. Try to use ramps with a slope of less than 10% to make pushing easier and safer. Additionally, keep the load within our more powerful range from shoulder to mid-thigh to minimize the risk of injury. Again, trying to work in that power zone. When moving objects, try to push instead of pull for better efficiency and safety. So pushing helps better utilize your body weight, giving you more control and power over the movement. With pushing, you can also see the travel path ahead a bit better and not having to turn your body, reducing the risk of obstacles. And pushing allows you to use both hands and offers better stability and control. And finally, pushing keeps your spine aligned, preventing twisting and reducing strain on your back. So when performing a push task or a pull task, we want to keep our hands below our shoulders, closer to the waist height without bending at the back. This allows the push force to be directed through the lower back and allows us to use our stronger leg muscles to push. So we can see in that left picture there, if the force is going above your lower back, you're really going to have to be contracting your core, and your core and your back are going to be taking a lot of that force. When it's lower, more in that power push zone, you can use your legs more, and the weight, you don't have to control the weight as much with your torso. There is a bit of a trade-off with your shoulders, but also working in elevated shoulder positions isn't great either. So finding a good happy medium where you can push from that area going kind of through your lower back area there. Similarly, when you're pulling, same idea applies. We want to keep our hands below the shoulders to allow the force to come from our leg muscles and in a neutral back posture. Okay, so now we'll quickly go over some assessing the risk. When we're getting into hazard identification and risk assessment, we go off this Sobain levels of hazard identification research out of Belgium, which looked at mostly when looking for workplace hazards, about 60% of the workplace hazards are identified at the screening level. So the workers identify hazards based on their firsthand experience, utilizing things like body mapping, surveys, or these OCAL apps that we have. And at the next level, we see observation. We see about 25% of the hazards identified. And this is through investigations that can be done by the Joint Health and Safety Committees. Then we move on towards more of the analysis stage. So bringing in an ergonomist or somebody to look at the different hazards. And this is a detailed, more quantitative evaluation. And we might use things like RULA and REBA or the Liberty Mutual tables to go over it. And then finally, the expert level, bringing in a researcher or somebody who's going to really investigate some sort of specific issue in a workplace or work. So body mapping can help to identify common health issues and workplace risks. It helps recognize problems and the need for further investigation and helps communicate these findings to the stakeholders. Body mapping is a simple visual tool whereby the worker marks their places of discomfort on an image, such as the one on this slide here. So that's a quick way to evaluate, what might be affecting workers in certain jobs. Checklists are another way to go about it. And checklists provide a structured way to identify hazards. Talking to the workers to get firsthand insights, observing work helps to see how tasks are performed in real time. And finding checklists can be documented by taking notes or drawing diagrams and capturing photos. And they can help prioritize action by using findings to decide where to focus efforts. And actually, last week we just released the quick exposure check tool on our website. And this is made for assessing exposure to risk factors for work-related MSDs. And this is now available on a website version, so you can use it from any computer or phone. And it also has a phone app through the Google and iPhone that you can download and use this tool. And it's very quick and just does a quick exposure check for these hazards. We also have Painpoint, which is available on the iPhone store. Right now, it's not on the Google. It was, but it needs some updates to go back on the Google store. But it provides a basic ergonomic assessment displaying results on a body map. It basically combines a survey about workplace hazards and postures for MSDs while also adding in a body mapping chart, and allows people to send that information to the Joint Health and Safety Committee or whoever's looking at it in reports that they can put together to create a document basically saying what's going on in the workplace. Similarly, we also have Hazard Assess, and this goes more outside of the realm of MSDs. It goes into things like chemical exposures and all different types. So it's got 12 different categories of hazards that you can report, and it's meant for that kind of worker level where they can go around our Joint Health and Safety Committee, take pictures of the hazards, put them in a nice PDF report, single out kind of what the hazard is, and then put that forward. So again, it's at that screening level. We also have Job Assess. And if you've ever done a physical demands analysis, this is a lot like that, but with a lot more built into it. So Job Assess can be used to accurately and efficiently perform a job demands analysis. It can also be used to just look at a specific task. And you need a MyOCal account first to create this, but these are free. So all the services and tools and apps that we have are all free, but you just have to sign up and register on the website. So this app allows users to select their unit of measurement as well as what they wish to capture in the assessment. So they can do things like the physical, the sensory, cognitive, psychosocial, or they can do all of them. And it's really meant to capture all the demands that can go into a job, and you can kind of track them over time, or if a job changes, you can edit it. We've also built in a system that's a red flagging system. So as you work through Job Assess, there's an option to select a red flag that's associated with each area of concern, as well as the ability to add notes to help best understand the job. So instead of just documenting everything and having it, and then having to look through after and seeing what areas might be of concern, you can kind of do it as you're going and use this red flag system. There's also an area you can, for each input that you have, for additional notes, if you want to describe what's going in there, why things might be a certain way. Okay, and then this is just an example of the strength section here. And you can see all the different sections related to physical tasks in there. So you'll go through and you'll open one up. So say we lifted up the the lifting. And you can see all the different inputs that you can have, the different forces, the duration, the frequencies, the efforts per minute or cycle. And then we also added in a Borg scale for each of the physical demands ones, so that we can get some self-rated perceived difficulties of the task to add, to the total overall understanding of the job. And then finally, Job Assess allows you to create reports. So this is what a sample would look like. I just made these up for presentation purposes, the firefighter Hamilton department. And so what you can do as you're working through, you'll save your report. And then if anything changes for the job and you want to update it or you want to create a new one, you can take that same one and basically what it does, it creates a new copy and then you can work on that new copy. So it doesn't delete the old jobs. So you can really see how a job changes over time. And any workplace can use this service and save all their PDFs or their JDAs on here in different formats. You can use Excel or PDF. And there's a way to export them all in Excel and put them all together so you can compare different jobs and see all the different factors and how they align with different jobs. Okay, and now further, so those are all kind of documenting, and now this is kind of getting into the more expertise stuff, the assessing. So I'll just kind of go over different options here quickly, but not really explain them. This just recently we had a presentation on this slide alone that was about 45 minutes, so they are quite in depth. But so Rula is one, and this tool provides a single score as a snapshot of the task, and it looks at the risks to neck and upper limb loading. So it rates the posture, the force, and the movement required, and you basically go through and check off, you take a snapshot of a posture and you go through and look and say, okay, they have this arm angle, this elevation, this much repetitiveness or this duration that they're using, and you put it all in, and at the end it'll give you a risk of the risk of an MSD score. So you can see that to the bottom left there once it all adds up. And it looks pretty confusing, but it's not too hard to use once you get used to it. And then similarly, there's the REBA, so Rapid Entire Body Assessment. Rula is just the upper body, but REBA does all of it. And I would suggest if you're doing just upper body, upper limb, I would use Rula. But REBA is also very similar and adds a total body posture check. Okay, and then finally the Liberty Mutual tables. So data is entered into this calculator, and I'll show a picture of that after. And the metric that is derived from this table calculator is based on the population percentile. So this is the percent of the population that can be expected to do a specific task without straining themselves or without becoming unusually tired, weakened, overheated, or out of breath. This score can be calculated for lifting, lowering, pushing, pulling, or carrying tasks. And this tool is free and available for everyone at the link above. So musculoskeletal pain or injuries do not occur only because of the severity of the task parameters. So it's important to remember that. Based on this, the task should not really be evaluated just based on these population percentiles. There's other important considerations. So things like if the job is causing injuries, it should be redesigned. If there's frequent bending, twisting, or reaching, regardless of the weight that's recommended. So this tool does not evaluate one-handed tasks as well. So it should be used for designing tasks so that as many workers as possible in terms of the percentage of population can perform the task without the risk of injury. So just to show a quick example, I apologize for the image size here, but as an example, the categories of information that we need are the task type, system of units, hand coupling, frequency of the lifts, so the lifts per minute, the object weight. We need the start hand height, the end hand height, the start hand distance, and the end hand distance. And then we select calculate, and at the bottom and in the box to the right, you'll see the population percentage capable of performing that task. So we can see that it says 71% of the male population and less than 1% of the female population. So in this case, this would not be considered a safe task, and we would want to redesign it. Okay. Okay, so that's it for everything. If you have any questions, please ask me them. I think there are some that popped up in the chat there, but if you have any more information or more questions, you can definitely email me at dstevenson@ocow.on.ca. Thank you.
Daryl, we have a question in the chat. So when you talk about the psychology effect, are you referring to pace and nagging or something else?
Yeah, so we were talking about I think that came up before I brought up the slide on the psychosocial risk factors. So those were what I was talking about. So things like work pace, work demands, things like offensive behaviors at work that can stress people in that sense. So not really like the cognitive aspects of the work unless it's adding to the stress, but it's the work pace, those things that add to stress. So psychosocial risk factors.
Perfect. All questions have been answered in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, if you have any further, just feel free to email me whenever you want.
So Daryl, the question I'll just repeat for you, because we didn't have our mics working properly was, oh, Ben, can you just say it again? Because I got discombobulated.
Can you talk about braces and sleeves, compression sleeves, and when to use what injuries, and how to use it properly? And also
Yeah.
how to use a shoulder brace.
What was the last word there?
Use a shoulder brace.
Shoulder brace. Well, so braces, we tend not to, so I get asked this question quite a bit, actually. I get workplaces that say, we've had people with back injuries. Should we put everyone in a back brace? And we definitely generally say no. That's not the way to do it. The way to do it is to try to redesign the job. If you're getting to the point where people have to wear braces for a specific job, then the job is too risky. It's definitely not the way. You don't want people relying on braces. And there's been some, I think there's Trevor has a study that he's seen that, and I think it was Home Depot or Home Hardware, where they had people in back braces and it ended up causing more issues. But braces are for when, people have specific injuries and they go to their physiotherapist or their doctor and they wear them for their own specific reasons, but they're generally supposed to be in the healing process at that time. So wearing these braces is kind of masking the issue, I think, and we want to try to avoid that if possible. It should kind of be the last resort.
More of a so fantastic presentation. I mean, when I'm sitting here looking at it, you have all these fantastic tools in our system. So what is the interaction of these tools and the prevention officer or the Center for Research Expertise in Musculoskeletal? Because how I see it, OCAL, this is based on real workers who've come into OCAL, have been damaged. You have a whole cohort of information that's come from it. You have it, but how does this transfer to the CPO? I mean, do they even know that you have this? And are they sending it to their prevention people in the ministry, inspectors? Maybe it's a question you can't answer, but this is something that I'm sitting here and going, wow, it's here. Is anybody really utilizing it other than people in this room?
That's a very good question. We talk a lot about that at our meetings. How do we get our tools more out there? How do we get more promotion? And we do events like this, and I try to include them where they seem appropriate in presentations. But yeah, it's a good question, and trying to get more reach and impact because we do have a lot of things to offer.
I'll just add, because Carmen, I love your questions, and that is what today is all about. Spring into action. You're not here for professional development. You're here to take what the seeds that we're planting to your unions, to your labor organizations, to your day of mourning, to your Labor Day, to your, and keep spreading the word from people, trusted people, that these are available to you. You have the role. We have a prevention office that has that role, but don't get me started. But we that's it. It's everyone taking action. And I think that's why we do these events, knowledge mobilization. And we don't do it, we want to do it better. Help us do it better. How do we reach? And yeah, we are at our break, but I know, Kate, there were questions online. I don't know, Daryl, if you're able to answer them in the chat possibly, which doesn't
Sure.
help the audience here. Kate, thoughts?
Yes, we just have one final question from Matt. Do the psychosocial questions in the app align with the CSA psychological standard and the 13 risk factors?
I'm assuming you're asking about the QEC app. It wouldn't cover all of those. The QEC is more of a quick check, but definitely our stress assess app goes very deep into the psychosocial risk factors and covers all the 13.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So now we will have a little bio break for those in the room and those online. Get up and stretch, learn from Daryl, get your movement in, and we will be back. David Chesney is going to join us for closing remarks as he's now functioning technically, but doesn't want to interrupt our session. So thank you. 10 minutes.
Yeah,
And unmuted.
so it's gotta find my presentation.
Oh, you don't want to stay in that?
No,
I'll take it out.
no, that,
Oh, okay, I'll get
I don't
it.
want to get in trouble.
Uh-oh. Need a little podium light. It just got too dark all of a sudden. Sir, just if you wouldn't mind, just for 1 second while I. Oh, that's a good idea. I could have used my phone. Yeah. Okay. No, it's good. They turned the lights right back up for me. Okay, good to go then. Okay, welcome back, everybody. My name is Paul LaHaye. I'm a proud member of OPSU, and I work out of Algonquin College. Our next presentation is going to be a review of how OCAO heat stress prevention information designed specifically for migrant or temporary foreign agricultural workers, and discuss how OCAO outreach workers have distributed and used these resources with workers across Ontario. In addition, review a pilot project that has helped Ontario migrant agricultural workers take temperatures and humidity measurements inside their employer-provided bunkhouses during the summer, and some concerning data that has been collected. We're going to hear from 2 speakers. First, there will be Eduardo Huesca. Pardon my pronunciation if I screwed that up. Eduardo has worked with migrant temporary foreign workers across Ontario for 17 years, with particular experience with migrant agricultural workers. He is a project manager with the Occupational Health and Clinics for Ontario Workers, and currently manages OCAO's 2 migrant worker projects, including OCAO's federally funded TNO-WSS project, which focuses on work with temporary foreign workers in Eastern Ontario and the Ottawa region. And also we'll be hearing from Andre Gauvin, who is an occupational hygienist with OCAO, with over 15 years experience in occupational health. Andre is a graduate from Laurentian University with a Bachelor of Science in Kinesiology and a Master's of Human Kinetics. He has started his career in ergonomics and has made a transition to occupational hygiene in 2018. He is a board certified by both the Canadian College for Certification in Professional Ergonomics by the American Board of Industrial Hygiene. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just trying to share my screen here. Let's see if this. Ooh.
And we've the presentation just a little bit. So Andre is going to start more broadly talking about heat stress, and then I'm going to kind of end with more kind of our applied work with migrant agriculture workers.
All right. So can you see the presentation here? Same one I'm seeing, addressing heat stress in agricultural workplaces. All right, perfect. So like Eduardo said, I'm going to start, I'm going to kind of introduce the heat stress toolkit. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it already, but we'll just go through it briefly. And then Eduardo is going to talk about the agricultural workplaces and the case study that they did last summer. And we'll go through a bit of data afterwards. Hopefully we have time for that. It is, so I have quite a few slides and I'll be going through it pretty quickly. But again, like Kimberly said, we're trying to promote the toolkit as much as possible. So having you help kind of bring it out to everybody, that'd be great. So let's get to it. So what's our current situation, right? So basically what happened with the MOL, we had a proposed regulation, we provided submissions, and they decided to keep the current legislation, which is section 25(2)H, to take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for protection of the worker. So they're saying that, you know, we trust employers to do the right thing. So hopefully that happens. But there is also the new challenge of climate change and awareness and wildfire smokes, and then temporary foreign workers. So again, you know, we have all these agricultural workers coming in for temporary work, and how are their conditions? And so we've had a lot of experience with the other heat stress tools from the Occupational Health and Safety Council of Ontario, which we kind of brought everyone back in to develop the heat stress toolkit. And there was an opportunity with funding to update, so that's what we did. And we also had experience with evaluation of health and safety interventions through other HSAs and work groups and unions and things like that. So we've used all of this to put into the tool. And this is kind of what we ended up with. So the Ontario Government Climate Change Report. So just to talk about a little bit about climate change and what's going on. So in the 2023 report, they're saying that we had an average of 8.6 to 9, let's say 8 to 9 days above 30 degrees Celsius. Looking at our three major cities in Ontario, Windsor, Toronto, Ottawa, kind of spread more southern than where I'm at in Sudbury here, but we had a lot more days than 9 days of 30-degree weather. So they're a little bit behind on that, I think. And you can see just from that, from what they're seeing to compare to the data that we have, climate change is a real thing. It's actually, we are seeing a lot more days above 30 degrees Celsius. So we have the toolkit available now. It's been available for about a year as of this month, actually. So I suggest you go take a look at it. We have the 3 guides here. So the prevention tools and strategies, the heat stress monitoring guide, and the heat stress awareness guide. We'll go through a little bit of more of the prevention tools and strategies. The awareness guide kind of looks at, kind of tells all about heat stress, right? What is heat stress? How does it affect you? Goes through thermoregulation of the body and different things like that. It also goes through chronic effects of heat. So it'll talk about different conditions that you can have through chronic effects of heat or chronic heat exposure. And then the monitoring guide kind of goes into physiological monitoring, whether it's with wearable tools or surveys and things like that. And there's some tools in there that you can use, different surveys that are available in that guide. And then the prevention tools and strategies, we'll talk a little bit more about that here today, is how do you measure that, basically? And what are the strategies to move forward with heat stress? So our target audience when we developed this was, who are we trying to reach and what are we trying, or what do we want them to do, not just know? So this is kind of where the prevention tools and strategies guide is. They have that one booklet they can grab, and it's a summary of both the other guides, a little bit more focused on measurement and what on tools that people can use, right, to actually measure and make change in the workplace. So the direct audience was those supporting and protecting heat exposed workers. So that includes employers, managers, supervisors, fellow workers, joint health and safety committee members, health and safety representatives, and the workplace union as well. So obviously union, employer associations, and health and safety professionals will find this information useful. And because it was originally a project requested and produced by the OSHCO committee, we made sure that we re-engaged everyone. So we had the Ontario Health and Safety System partners, the Ministry of Labor, unions, and the OFL included in all of our meetings for the heat stress toolkit, to make sure we have everybody's input and that we're addressing everyone's concerns. So the fundamental principles are to de-technologize. So we want to make sure, we want to promote the fact that people kind of already know when their bodies are warm, right? And they don't really need all these expensive tools to tell them that. So, listening to your body is good. The thing is, you need to make sure that people are trained for that. So supported self-regulation. So ideally, this is, the goal is that workers are able to detect signs and symptoms and would have the resources and freedom to respond appropriately. So although this is always the practical solution in all workplaces, but most of them, if they're feeling hot or feeling discomfort, they should be able to take a break and self-regulate. So in this toolkit, we provide a simplified TLV-based tools. So similar, well, it is basically the HumanX tool. So that would be the simplified, but we also go through the other tools as well. and then recognize self-calibration. So after a period of time closely measuring, workers tend to self-calibrate unconsciously. So they can actually accurately guess based on how they're feeling what heat stress interventions are needed. So whether they need water just to take a break or sit in a cool area, people know how they feel. That is the best measure is, recognizing the signs and symptoms. So if you do recognize that you're having some signs of heat stress, go have a break. And then you also have the last resort, which is medical monitoring. So this is collecting medical information, and it requires a lot of confidentiality agreements and things like that. But this could be, this would be used in situations where, we actually did something in greenhouses before, and they had to actually have someone monitoring them at all times because they were wearing Tyvek suits when they were spraying chemicals or pesticides and things like that. So, they're not even Tyveks, they're fully encapsulated suits. So they needed to have somebody monitor them at all times, and they had a work rest schedule of 10 minutes maximum work for a 50-minute break. So with the prevention tools and strategies, we took this layered approach. So we went from more simpler to more frequent, or more complex and less frequent. And then that is pretty well, you have your supported self-management, which is your optimal situation where workers are able to, recognize signs and symptoms and take breaks as needed. Then you have your Humidex plan, which is a simplified version of the TLV. Then you have the actual TLV, so the screening TLV, and then there's a more detailed TLV with the ACGIH. And then it goes into physiological and medical monitoring using the ACGIH TLV as well. So here, like I said, we'll just go through the four. So self-supported management, so knowledgeable workers who have demonstrated they are able to recognize early signs and symptoms. They're supported by their supervisors, are provided the latitude to manage their work rate and their fluid intake. So this level of heat stress management cannot be followed without proper heat stress awareness and prevention training. So you got to make sure that all your workers are properly trained and that are aware, and they're able to demonstrate that to really be able to follow this appropriately. Then we go into the Humidex plan. This is a little bit more complex situations, not crazy complex, but just a little simpler to use. So this is worker based. So the worker could take the Humidex plan, they could take measurements on their own, basically, based on temperature and relative humidity, and then they can convert it to Humidex or WBGT estimates and have a prescriptive preventative action. And this is all in the toolkit here. So this is obviously for workplaces without process heat or humidity sources and regular work clothing and moderate workloads as well. So anytime you're getting into heavier workloads or you have some process heat or they're wearing extra clothes, you want to move to the screening TLV, which is the official screening using the WBGT measurements and appropriate applications of the work rest regimes to prevent heat stress. So again, it's for complex and unusual exposures where often they're doing heavy or very heavy work. And it can be technically challenging as well using the TLV analysis method, which is all outlined in the ACGIH TLV. And you would need a WBGT meter for these methods. There's other ways to measure WBGT, right, which is wet bulb globe temperature for those who don't know. And especially for outdoor workers, and we will go through that a little bit at the end. And then you have your TLV for physiological monitoring. So this is for very complex cases where people are wearing heavy clothing, they're using like high process heat, things like that, where they might need some physiological monitoring. You can also use some physiological self-monitoring, like smartwatches or apps, but these are unofficial approaches, and you should take caution. The accuracy and validity becomes a problem because none of this is really studied yet. Crush is in the works of studying some of these tools. But again, they're even saying, the accuracy and validity is kind of all over the map on a lot of these tools. So, just take caution when you're doing it. Most of them, they're consistent on their own, but it's when you compare them to other tools, they might be different. So when you're using one tool and you're sticking to that tool, then you might get some accuracy and validity from that. The only thing is we don't know if that level is accurate. Or you're getting validity, maybe not accuracy. That's kind of what I'm trying to say there. So anyways, let's move forward here. So supported self-management. So again, we're looking at training workers, supervisors, recognizing early signs and symptoms. Training workers can show demonstration of knowledge so that they know how to practice, the skills of the the heat stress management plan. And they need to be supported by supervisors, employers, so they need access to a cool, shaded area. They can take their breaks as needed. They can manage their own fluid intake, and they have access to water and fluid. And co-worker observation, so using a buddy system with verbal cues, and having a hot weather plan, such as a Humidex for days where it does get extremely hot, and people aren't used to working in those temperatures. So when you follow the ACGI HTLV, people can be acclimatized to a certain temperature, whether it's 26 degrees Celsius, and if they're working in that temperature all the time, okay, now at the early part of the season, they're taking that 2-week period to become acclimatized to that temperature only. But as soon as it goes up to 30 degrees, they're not acclimatized to that anymore. So you have to follow a hot weather plan. So again, there's other tools you can use. So you have low-tech tools similar to this urine chart here, which shows you whether you're dehydrated or not. And we have a lot of infographics as well to remind people of signs and symptoms. Just to, you can post that on your bulletin boards or in washrooms, things like that, to keep workers reminded. So here again, we go through for the supportive self-management. What are the training? What is the training, right? So you have your health effects and first aid. So you need to know what the health effects are. So heat edema or swelling, basically in your hands and feet, heat rash, heat syncope or fainting. This usually happens earlier on in the season, typically after you ate a meal or something like that. Then you can have some heat cramps, and it's usually in the muscles that you're using. And it's a lack of electrolytes. That's kind of what's happening there. If you have less electrolytes feeding your muscles, then they can cramp up. Dehydration, then heat exhaustion, heat stroke, chronic health effects, heat strain carryover. So heat exhaustion and heat stroke, they're obviously the more severe symptoms of heat stress. You really gotta take caution there. If someone's going through heat exhaustion, they may be experiencing some, confusion. Some confusion. They may be disoriented, things like that. And heat stroke, you really got to watch for these signs, especially when they're getting at that heat exhaustion stage. They can be deadly. So having that buddy system is important there. And heat strain carryover. So we found a study actually that, you think that when you're under heat strain, your body's going to become acclimatized, but in older individuals, that it has the opposite effect. So as you are exposed to heat on multiple days, on day 1 and 2, you're getting positive effects, and on day 3 and 4, when you're supposed to be acclimatizing, it actually has negative effects to your body, and it doesn't actually work in a way that it would for a younger worker. So things to consider. So what factors can we measure for heat stress? So again, we have the Humidex plan, which is your temperature relative humidity, the ACGI HTLV, which is based on the effective WBGT. So that would be taking your WBGT measure and then adding the adjustments to them. So clothing adjustments and metabolic rate and wind factor. And then you have your physiological monitoring, which is heart rate, skin temperature, core temperature. And this is for complex heat stress programs. So we use the ACGIH TLV because this is the gold standard. Basically, every heat stress management plan that we've seen is based off the ACGIH. The reason we use the ACGIH because it's evidence-based. Contains detailed literature summaries, explains the derivation of TLV values. There's instructions on how to properly apply the TLVs, and it's considered minimal professional practice standards in the hygiene practice. And it's been in use since 1974, and it's constantly updated. So every year there's a new booklet that comes out with updates on whichever topic they decided to update that year. Usually there's a committee behind that, and they look at what is trending, what's hot, what's not, and then they're like, okay, well, if this is what's going on right now, we need to update these TLVs to make sure that we're in line with everyone. So moving down the ladder to or the level to the Humidex plan. So you'll notice in the Humidex plan that we removed Humidex 2, and the reason for that is acclimatization. So employers were always saying that their workers are acclimatized, so they were using Humidex 2, which was a lot more forgiving than Humidex 1. So we removed that so that people are just using Humidex 1 when they're calculating the heat, the Humidex-based heat response plan, or using the Humidex-based heat response plan. And we'll talk a little bit about that. So what is the argument behind acclimatization? So based on the TLV, acclimatization requires physical activity under heat stress conditions like those anticipated for the work, with a recent history of heat stress exposure of at least 2 continuous hours for 5 of the last 7 days for a worker to be considered acclimatized for the purposes of the TLV. So after a certain amount of time, acclimatization declines when activity under heat stress conditions is discontinued. So there's a noticeable loss after 4 days, and it may be completely lost after 3 weeks. So a person may not be fully acclimatized to sudden or episodic higher level of heat stress. So like I was mentioning earlier, someone who's working in 26-degree weather all the time at a specific Humidex or relative humidity of about, which is usually ranges between 40 to 60%. That's probably what they're acclimatized to. But as soon as they get up to that 30-degree level, and that could be within a day, well, now you should be looking at a heat stress management plan. So our experience with all of this is that employers just assume everyone's acclimatized, so we remove that option. So looking at the data just from the Lincoln Weather Station, this is near Hamilton, or between Hamilton and Niagara. So this is in wine country, basically. So we're looking at, outdoor days here. There's only 3 days. This is in 2023. So we had 3 days of heat exposure to above the acclimatized TLV threshold, which they would be considered acclimatized. And then you have almost 3 weeks off where they don't have any temperatures above that. So they're not acclimatized to that threshold. And then again, in September, they had 3 days. So looking at this, these workers who are working outdoors only, if there's no process heat, and this is, under solar radiation and taking it to account the wind velocity as well, they are not acclimatized. So now we look at 2024, it's a very similar situation. We had 3 days in June, and then nothing for over a month, and then 2 days in August, because in July we only had, we had 2 days, but only 1 hour of exposure, and you need 2 hours of exposure to become acclimatized. And then again, at the end of August, we had 1 day. So again, there's no acclimatization here. So how do you measure Humidex? So measuring the temperature and relative humidity, you can use the dry, wet bulbs. You can use a sling psychrometer, and then you would apply this to the relative humidity chart here. Or you can just get a thermal hygrometer, which is the most common way, simpler way. These hygrometers are pretty efficient now. They're very accurate and easy to use. So we use these now to calculate Humidex. So can we estimate the WBGT from temperature and relative humidity? Well, we could. So Thomas Bernard has tables on his website that uses the dry bulb temperature, dew point, or the relative humidity to estimate the WBGT based on temperatures. So we added this to the toolkit as well. So we have, here's what the estimated WBGT version looks like. So it's just a matter of changing these numbers to correlate with the Humidex. And then we have our response plans here that show both. So we have the adjusted Humidex and what it corresponds to in WBGT. So this is part of the plan as well. And then we get into the detailed WBGT. So workplaces we notice that workplaces aren't really implementing the TLV properly. So the online calculator that we have will walk them through the TLV steps. So it makes sure that they have adequate training. It'll have the correction factor for metabolic weight or metabolic use. So whether you're in, moderate, heavy, or very heavy work, and that could change based on weight, right, of the individual. And then it includes the outdoor sun or indoor factors, and then clothing adjustment factors, your climatization level, and then it notes the difference of those who are biologically female at birth. So thermoregulation is a little bit different for women, and that's due to their menstruation cycle, and then as they get older, menopause, and then their pregnancy as well, right? If they're pregnant, their body runs warmer than a typical individual. So the ACGIH TLV is recommended if you are acclimatized for working with process heat, heavy or very heavy workloads. Again, when you're using the detailed WBGT, you need to go through all the steps of training, metabolic correction, process heat or outdoor sun, and clothing adjustment factors and acclimatization. So when you're using the screening criteria, you need a measurement of the WBGT. So you're supposed to have the machine and the knowledge and training to do that. So it becomes a little more complicated at this point. So not anybody can do this. Typically, you have to bring someone in who's trained on the equipment. You have to consider the clothing adjustments, and that's why it's called the effective WBGT. So you're adjusting for metabolic rate and clothing, and then you determine your acclimatization, and then you would add that to your table 3 here. So basically, you have your light, moderate, heavy, and very heavy for acclimatized workers, and then unacclimatized workers. You'll notice quite a big difference in the WBGT and what you should be applying it to. And these values in the table assume an 8-hour workday and a 5-day work week with conventional breaks. So it's not looking at people who are working 12 hours. So you'd have to adjust for that. So the metabolic rate issue, like I mentioned earlier, it does look at the weight. So this is something new that they added to the TLV in 2022. Well, actually, it was always in it, but they've actually put more emphasis on it in 2022 because people were applying this wrong as well. So they weren't actually calculating the ratio of the body weight. So this is estimated on someone who's 54 or 154 pounds. But if someone's 180 pounds, then you have to calculate that. So you would divide the actual weight by 154 pounds and then multiply that by one of these numbers. So it would give you, if you're 180 pounds, it's about 1.3 times 415 watts, which will give you a number which will really bring you into the very heavy metabolic rate. So just something to keep in mind. People aren't usually using this appropriately. So we're all different, so we need to make sure that we measure for that. So we also have the ACGIH clothing adjustment factors. So this is the typical, well, this is what we see typically, right, through the ACGIH. But we always had the question, like, what if you're wearing leather gloves, hard hat, N95 for silica dust, earmuffs, in addition to overalls, things like that. So we have a study that we found that has all of these. We were looking at comparing cooling rates in different body parts, and we found the study that looks at different or sweating outputs, basically different parts of your body. So with that, we're able to look at the relative contribution and of different body regions, and we were able to have a derived clothing adjustment factor. So we have this in the toolkit as well. So they're able to apply this, and it's built into the calculator as well. So they can apply this in the calculator, and it'll give them the adjusted Humidex or the effective WBGT. And then we go into physiological monitoring, which can be a useful tool in working in hot environments with high physical activity. So we did talk about this a little bit about, collection confidentiality and medical information, and then self-monitoring, which is a good thing as well. If you're doing that, and could typically lead to self-calibration, which evolves into supported self-management. But again, you got to remember about the reliability and validity of these tools. And I would definitely look into the monitoring guide to get more information on this. So here's a calculator. I'm not going to go through it. If you want to, the link is here. It's simple to use. Go ahead and play with it. There's a bunch of infographics as well that you can use, but this is kind of what it looks like. So what type are you collecting, whether you want to do the detailed WBGT or the Humidex, just the temperature and relative humidity. And it goes through all the assumptions. So you need to check all the assumptions before.
Andre, sorry. Can you hear me? I just want to do a time check with you because we need Eduardo, and he only has 3 minutes right now.
3 minutes. Okay. We started late. I guess that's why.
No, we gave you the extra time in there. Just checking in.
Well, Eduardo started let's go right now then. So this is the SOP we have as part of the toolkit as well. And go ahead, Eduardo.
Okay, yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I think we should have maybe considered a little bit more time or mentioned, but okay, so I'll try to go as quickly because I think, the next speaker is in 5 minutes. But I'm just gonna talk a little bit about our work with migrant agricultural workers around heat stress awareness and prevention. But I think as a theme, and it's a great connection to what Andre has been talking about in terms of tools and resources, but I think some themes that I wanted to have us kind of consider beyond if anybody else is working with migrant agriculture workers is just considering, whether the occupational health and safety resources and tools we develop are accessible to the workers who need them. Are we considering the experiences of workers, particular worker groups, to ensure our resources and tools are contextualized and relevant and impactful for the workers who need them, especially in the context of potentially ununionized workplaces or workplaces where occupational health and safety is less supported, where workers, the health and safety rep or committee role isn't as cemented in the workplace, and sometimes where workers are fearful to speak up. So next slide, Andre, thanks. And Andre's going to be controlling my slide, but I'll just go through it. So we've been working with temporary foreign workers for quite some time, and it's an important group to focus in on occupational health and safety because they're at a high hazard industry, as well as, the Institute for Work and Health mentions that newcomer workers are at a higher level of occupational injury and illness, and these workers kind of fall under that in terms of the reasoning that IWH gives, which is where they're working, the level of empowerment they have, their awareness of their rights that they have, and their ability to speak up about hazards and not be fearful for reprisals. Next slide. So we started working around heat and these workers early on, and we had a really hard time finding resources that worked for these workers, resources that were accessible to them in their languages. So many migrant agriculture workers speak non-English languages, including Spanish, Thai, and Tagalog. But also for the English-speaking workers, there's a lot of literacy challenges. So we were, scarce to find resources, Ontario heat stress resources that were accessible, and that also considered their unique experience. We also weren't able to find resources that also, in addition to talking about kind of heat awareness and prevention resources, actually said something to do with what should workers do if they were experiencing heat-related concerns and where to get help. And that kind of what to do and where to get help is so vital in terms of our work with precarious workers or workers, again, in these settings that are less empowered. Next slide. So we found a lot of resources in the U.S. We tend to find a lot of resources from the U.S. based on their experience with migrant agriculture workers for many, many years. Their resources are quite ahead of ours. So we found this Kalosha heat illness prevention toolkit that was really good. And next slide, and I'll kind of then just mention, so there was a bunch of resources from supervisor checklists to worker educational resources, and we really were blown away by these resources. And this was early days before OCal's heat stress toolkit, before our other infographics on heat for migrant agriculture workers. Next slide. So this was the resource that we ended up using in our engagement with migrant agriculture workers. So it was a very visual format resource, and really talked about symptoms, but also what workers could do, but also what was expected at the workplace, what should be expected at the workplace. Next slide. We didn't use these resources, but we were very happy to see that at the California level, they were already talking about a heat call line, or a heat call line, I think they called it. So it's where workers could call if they were experiencing or didn't find what their employer should be doing around heat, where they should call to get help and report this to CalOSHA. We don't, I don't know necessarily how this reporting actually functions, or I can't kind of speak to the efficiency of the reporting, but to see resources, speaking to reporting was very, very great for us. And recognizing then the creators of these resources really understood that these workers really require somewhere to go when things are not, when they're not being protected by workplace parties. And here you had a whole kind of guide on how to report a problem to CalOSHA. Even as a community organization, it spoke to how you could help workers, agriculture workers, report. Next slide. And so we did 25 workshops for migrant agriculture workers on heat stress between 2012 and 2014. And we handed out, these are the regions where we did them, and we handed out that resource I mentioned. And next slide. We also asked workers who participated in the workshop about their experiences around heat exposure at work, and we collected the responses. Next slide. And so some of the, there was positives and negatives. They talked about having access to water and being able to frequently drink water. But for example, shade was the number one issue, that they could not find shade in the field to take breaks and cool themselves down. That kind of was always kind of something that mentioned. They hadn't received training. They didn't know what to do in a heat stress or heat stroke emergency. So there's definitely gaps that we identified. Next slide. And maybe next slide too. So we took this and we made it into an employer-facing resource to try to get employers kind of understanding what was missing and the things that were happening, the positive things, but also the negative things. We also ended up tweaking our workshop based on the findings from workers. So for example, workers noted that they experienced sunburn, and this was a kind of misconception that was in a lot of understandings around people with black and brown skin, but workers openly told us a lot about sunburn to the back of the neck, their face, and so we started giving them tubes of sunscreen and talking about sunscreen use, because that was something that they noted they hadn't received much information about. Next slide. Maybe I'll, next slide too, then I'll just skip through something. So we received, so all that previous work was through our core funding through the Ministry of Labor, but recently we received federal funding to hire an outreach team. And I can't speak more about such amazing work that that our outreach teams are doing. So we hired community members that have experience working with migrant workers and who themselves reflect the cultural communities of these workers. So this is one of our team, and next slide. And next slide. And this is our second team. Next slide. So through their support and through support from our occupational hygienists, we created a heat stress infographic for first outdoor agriculture workers. And I won't get too into it, but we really focused on key kind of components. Again, sign and symptom recognition, heat stroke symptoms, so really knowing that this is kind of now an emergency, but also again, what to expect at the workplace and what should be happening, and in trying to communicate empowerment of workers within the heat stress kind of hazard identification and searching for solutions. Next slide. We then created a hydration infographic. Next slide. And then a greenhouse infographic, just to focus in on the agriculture workplaces that were greenhouses. And next slide. then when the toolkit came, when the work with OCAL's toolkit came, it was great. It just added a whole bunch of more resources to our repertoire that we could engage workers on. And next slide. I specifically helped focus in on this empowerment infographic that where we really did try to talk about what workers could do if they encountered heat stress related concerns, and from talking to each other to talking to their workplace parties to then escalating it beyond the workplace if things were not. And unfortunately, you know, through John Odak, one of our Hamilton hygienists, we did put this, you know, some reference to, unfortunately, when workers have faced reprisals in Ontario, many don't end up getting their job back, is based on this literature that John identified for us. So we did say, you know, that this is tricky in recognizing that part, and then we did include some legal clinic information. Next slide. So we achieved this as some reporting from one quarter of last summer, and we got 2,064 print resources on heat stress safety that included our regular infographics and the heat stress toolkit directly to the hands of migrant workers. This is one of our team. The other team did very similar numbers, and we got about 300 water bottles, reusable water bottles, to the hands of migrant agriculture workers across regions too. And then I'll skip and I'll maybe just 1 minute and then I'm done. Sorry, I don't mean to eat into the next presenter too much, but so these are just pictures of that outreach. We're really on the ground. Our outreach workers, again, just do amazing work. And the next slide, maybe just to the last one. And I'll share my presentation where you can kind of look at this at your own time. So yeah, upcoming season, we're hoping to do more of these workshops and translate more information. And then maybe, yeah, the case study that we're not going to really mention, but one other issue that, our next slide, sorry. One of the issue that we really looked at was now we're seeing kind of a double burden of heat exposure to migrant workers. So next slide. We heard from workers that their housing, the employer provided housing, was reaching temperatures that were concerning to them. So we actually helped a worker, first one case of worker, we provided them an AirNet CO2 monitor and heat and humidity monitor. And we helped them measure temperatures. And this went really well in the sense of the worker felt empowered. We found some concerning temperatures in their employer provided housing. So we did a pilot and we helped 11 more houses of migrant agriculture workers take similar readings. So John Odyke, our hygienist from Hamilton, has pulled together the data, and the report is going to be available soon. But really, we are recognizing that there's a double burden of exposure where at the workplace they're heat exposed, then they get home, and the temperatures are a second level of exposure, and they lack then ability to rest and cool down at these employer housing. So that's definitely something we're gonna focus on. Thanks so much, and yeah, sorry about that, and we'll I'll end it there.
Thanks, Eduardo. Any questions from the audience?
More of a comment. So migrant workers, like there's a list of where they're working. So what's the ministry doing if OCAL, a little entity with a small budget, pick this up? Isn't the ministry targeting these farms that bring in these migrant workers? They're on a list. It's not like a construction companies, there's a 75,000 of them. These dudes, you know where they are. Like what are the ministry doing to ensure that these, like this, to me, it seems the last plantation, meaning that they're being exposed. We know that it's there. What's the ministry doing to go after this situation?
I think for heat, it's complicated. I think that's why next season we're looking to do kind of maybe workplace measurements using different tools like the AirNet or the SwitchBot to be able to identify kind of the temperatures that are happening in the workplace. But I think I would say that with the ministry around heat exposure at the workplace, they might kind of be seeing that there's nothing necessarily taking place that's wrong. The bunkhouse is another story where the ministry, WSIB does recognize that the employer provided housing is an extension of the workplace, but the Ministry of Labor doesn't. However, many more jurisdictions, like for example, Oregon, their health and safety systems are regulating the bunkhouses because they're employer provided. The worker's not selecting where they live. The employer is organizing that workplace. However, under the current standards for heat in these employer-provided housing, there's not a maximum temperature requirement, or as in a maximum temperature. So we actually presented to the federal government on the data, and they said that currently there's nothing that says that a temperature can't reach the temperatures that we're seeing. There's a minimum temperature, but there's not a maximum. So we're advocating for just blatantly, and this is the Schedule F housing inspection report. We're just advocating to change the language and increase, here maintaining a room temperature no higher than 26 degrees Celsius. That doesn't exist right now. So there's no, we actually help the workers report these temperatures to public health in the region that in Niagara, and public health said that there was nothing they could do. So it was quite regulation gaps, I guess.
And just to step in, like if you look at the data, just quickly, like this is an air-conditioned bunkhouse. You can see that it's relatively safe. They're in the safe zone, usually below 26. And then you look at an unconditioned bunkhouse. This is what we're seeing. So the blue is the outdoor temperature, and the red is the indoor temperature. So you're seeing differences of up to 16 degrees Celsius throughout the day on a warm summer day. So there is a high risk when they're in the bunkhouses.
Thank you so much. Are there questions online? Kate, we are trying to catch a bit of time, but we might steal a little bit of our lunch refreshment break, if that's okay with folks. We're a tiny crowd here as well. Any questions online, Kate?
There's no questions currently online.
Okay, that's wonderful. And we are continuing the efforts from a technical perspective, even in the occupational hygiene world, wearable technology, and but a lot of these tools really simplify in the field as needed, and then we make the technological advances where we can in the hygiene world with where there's funding, but we want to bring as simple solutions as we can to the those in most need. And I would let Sean take the mic, and introduce our next speaker.
Okay, thank you, Kimberly. Our next presenter, Carmine Tiano, has been the Director of Occupational Services through the Provincial Building Construction Trades Council of Ontario since 1997. Carmine has an MA from York University Economics, a diploma in regulatory law, is a graduate of McMaster University's Occupational Health Program. Carmine deals with workplace insurance, health and safety, and is involved with various research bodies. He teaches in the Disability Management and Health and Safety program at Pacific Coast University and presents at various conferences and seminars on occupational health issues. I've known Carmine for a number of years now. Carmine's a great guy. Carmine, come on up, brother.
You can smarter than yourself than I am. Good morning, everybody. Just get my presentation up online. Perfect. Yeah, video. No video. Just go down this way. Yeah. This one. Which one? This one. To the front. Where's the light? So you can try it now. Is that your first one? Yeah, right there. Perfect. Okay, great. Love when technology doesn't work. Thank you. It's interesting. The last presentation, we were talking about heat stress. And one of the things that the building trades we're working on is how when it comes to looking at the various legislation, how do we move the legislation into areas like work camps, right? So our workers leave and they go work in these remote areas in these camps, but really, when is the Occupational Health and Safety Act end, and where does it start impacting when someone's working, sleeping in a bunk area? So some of the things we're doing may have good synergy with what OCAL's trying to do with the migrant workers. So it's kind of cool. This is why situations like this, events like this, allow us to take the information and say, hey, we're doing this. Let's give it to a partner in the system. So pretty good work. What I want to talk about is this idea of shifting the paradigm, right? So all of us believe in safe workplaces. We believe when someone goes to work in the morning, they should come back safe. Now, our system in Ontario, interesting enough, I think, despite all our faults and our warts, probably the best in North America in many ways. And I'll show you when I go through it. At the building trades a few years ago, right before March of 2020, right? When the world's eyes opened up because it shut down, I was looking in many ways, right? It took us to open up by a virus we've never seen, right? So I started looking at this and I started looking at some things in construction, right? Because by then there was this thing going around, not the virus, in the system, in the partners, construction workers and suicides, construction workers and substance use. So what I was saying, this is not new, but it took COVID to get everybody's eyes to open. So when you look at construction, like other industries, our workers are susceptible not only to the work, the hazards at work, things like musculoskeletal problems, obesity, smoking, mental health, alcohol, substance use, right? These are all part of the worker's backpack of life. You take that backpack of life into the workplace, and then what happens? Then you're exposed to the hazards, right? There's like a negative synergy that happens, and then you could have bad outcomes. So what I was thinking, I was looking, I'm going, wow, I want to look at the whole creation of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, some of the writings at the time, the committees, and I'm going, okay, maybe we need to look at this whole idea of looking at this total worker health model, right? Because if you don't look at the total worker health, the backpack of life that Carmen brings into the work environment, how can you really create a safe work environment? So I started throwing this idea and I started looking at it and I'm going, oh, okay, there's already stuff out there. So this is what I want to do. I want to talk about the idea of shifting the paradigm to this whole idea of a total work health model. And in many ways, Ontario is one of the only jurisdictions in North America that has the supports to do it. And funny, OCAL is part of it. So I'm going to go through it. So now, if you look at the characteristics of a safe workplace, the worker, the World Health Organization has provided these characteristics. There should be environments where workers can perform their tasks without falling victim to illness, injury, or illness. Workplace need to provide workers the opportunity to improve their physical and mental health, and health and safety and resilient workplace should allow workers to be protected from catastrophic event when it occurs, right? So this is what the WHO says about it. Now, so why is work so influential into health and well-being? Well, Work controls elements of our daily life and schedule. Work decides our wages. Work conditions determine risks and controls for exposures. Work provides access to workers' compensation. And also, our system in Ontario, as everybody knows, when it comes to workers' compensation, our system, all the occupational health is funded by the WSIB in Ontario, employer premiums. So they forget about the side of the benefit side, the one that causes people angst. As a system partner, they're the ones who I think could be extremely important in the manner in which we move this whole idea of a total worker health model. And I'll talk about that in a minute, which will cause issues as well. Now, also continuing on why work's so influential. It enhances or diminishes our opportunities for meaningful health relationships. Shift work now has become a big problem. There's evidence that shift work has elevated cancers in certain segments. Also, the way we're changing the dynamics of work. Employers' locations is important, or where workers live. In the GTA, it's almost impossible to buy a house. The average price is over $1 million. People routinely now are driving over an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to work. You leave at 7 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, you're stuck in traffic, you already get to work. There's already a diminished capacity because you've left work, so you left to go to work. Now you're getting to work, and already there may be issues because of the distance where you work or where you live. Now, issues relevant to advancing worker health, total worker health model that I'm going to explain. I think as part of any total worker health model, we need to look at controlling of hazardous exposures, the chemicals and the physical agents. The organization of work. This is an extremely important one. You need to look at fatigue, stress, safe staffing, overtime management. I'm on the construction death review panel, which has been charged with looking at, moved away from coroner's inquests to grouping deaths together to find consistency of association, to find certain flags in the deaths. One of the things there's been some discussion on is looking at the hours of work. Think of it. People in certain industries working 12, 14-hour days for 4 or 5 consecutive weeks. Are you cognitively impaired? Could the schedule of work be one of the red flags? Why in construction over the last 20 years, we've had 20 deaths a year. And the deaths are coming from the same hazards, falling, struck by. Is maybe the work schedules an issue? I don't know. That's something that will be examined. Other areas, the built work environment. Does it support healthy air quality? During COVID, what do we find? There was an issue with ventilation systems in certain buildings. Leadership. We hear leadership all the time. Starts from the top. Is there a shared commitment? Supportive managers and supervisors. This is all important, but sometimes there's a huge lack of leadership at the very beginning, there is leadership at the beginning of a project. Everybody has a great binder of safety. Everybody's saying, hey, Carmen, here's what you got to do. You got to, we do toolbox talks, you report everything. But as the projects go along, the leadership gets weaker and weaker because the projects come behind schedule, and then it becomes the dollar. So the leadership at the beginning of the project may not be at the end when they become behind schedule. Compensation and benefits, another important one. I think in the last 15 years, there's been this move to create safety records based on LTI injuries, lost time injuries. We've done a really good job of eliminating injuries by denying them. What I mean is this. If you have issues with musculoskeletal, you have a workforce that's dealing with, as the first speaker talked about, musculoskeletal issues, and there's, say, an injury, and you have a worker that's 40, 45 years old. Our system, essentially what it's done by creating an adjudicative system, those claims are just denied. They never show up on any statistics. So if you know those claims are going to be denied, would you really put in any kind of ergonomic interventions? The most pressing one, I think, is this idea of mental stress, gradual onset stress. Our system in 2016 put in a framework that a gradual onset mental health condition at work, you need to show that work is the predominant cause, meaning that work is the predominant cause of that situation. When, say, in a musculoskeletal injury, is a significant contributing factor. So in many ways, our compensation system is actually creating negative health effects when all these claims are being denied. So something to keep in mind. Okay, and another area that I think is relevant to a strong total worker health model is community supports, healthy community designs, affordable housing, and in here you could also put things like availability of community health centers, etc. Okay, so some other issues, changing workforce demographics, policy issues, new employment patterns. Okay, in construction, contracting and subcontracting has always been just the way the industry is. Precarious work and contingent employment, moving to the Uber economy for the last 15 years. That isn't exactly what I think is conducive to a healthy society, but hey, this is where we're moving. Now, culture change trumps behavior. I should have taken that word Trump out, but especially after last, but I just decided to leave it in. So culture change trumps behavior change any day. So it is unreasonable to expect people to change their behavior when the social, culture, and physical environments do not support change. So for what I'm going to start talking about now, we need to move to creating a social, culture, and physical environment that supports change rather than doesn't. So what I want to introduce is this idea of the total worker health model. In 2003, NIOSH in the United States. Now, regardless of what we think of what's happening south of the border now, I think from 1972 on, when the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health was created, I think there's been a lot of good work done in the way of health and safety. Now, unfortunately, a lot of it, some of it is federal, some of it is state. But one thing I think that the U.S. did well is through NIOSH, the National Institute of Health, through their various funding entities. Back in the 1990s, under the first Clinton administration, there was a move in the United States to create the National Occupational Research Agenda, NORA. And what they did was they put research and occupational into sectors, construction, manufacturing, transportation, mining, etc. And in there, through the various funding systems in the US, money was flowed down through a National Occupational Research Agenda, through university partnerships and NIOSH to start looking at things. One of the things that came out of it was this idea of a total worker health model, which started to move into in 2003. So what the model focuses on is how occupational health and safety can better understand the adverse health effects correlated to the worker's exposures, physical and mental, and to job-related risk factors. The total worker health model also takes into account the individual health conditions, lifestyle risks that may be present. Okay, now, so it looks at what may happen at the workplace, but the other risks that can be part of someone's backpack of life, like I like to call it. So the total worker health model, this is the summary, builds on efforts to keep workers safe. Workplace enforcement is still an important component. Takes a systems approach, broadening worker safety and health efforts. Its comprehensive focus on higher quality of work, better design work. Now, I don't know if some people in the room or online, has anybody ever heard of designing for safety? Okay, so in the UK, Australia, New Zealand, I know for the construction, there's this designing for construction safety. So it starts at the beginning of the project, you design possibly any hazard zone. So that actually starts in the whole design, the better work design. Better work design could also be looking at materials in the build process. Also, the total worker health model views organization of work as a strong exposure opportunity. It's participatory, worker-centered, i.e., Workers' Health and Safety Committee, trades committees, health and safety reps. And by the way, our occupational health and safety system is participatory. Focuses on evidence-based research. Provides holistic solutions for workers and employers. Examines how work organization and work itself can holistically influence worker safety, health, and well-being. That's just a very summary. Now I want to go what it's not. Oh, sorry, before I get into there. And it follows already, a couple of the presenters have shown the hierarchy of controls. This is not new. So what it basically does, it takes the tools that we have and it just applies it to a total worker health model. Now, what it's not. Now, I know that when you hear things like this, there's already reservations that it's going to move into unintended consequences. The third bullet point, the total worker health model does not blame the worker. It's not behavioral-based safety. Critics of it say it is. It's not. They're completely two different things. Now, it's not consistent with workplace policy that discriminate against or penalize workers for their individual health conditions or create disincentives for improving health. It's not a wellness or health promotion program that has been implemented without consultation from workers. The total work health model does not and will not in any way lessen the importance of rigorous regulatory workplace enforcement. So I want to give you some examples. The Boilermakers Union across Canada has implemented a total worker health model in their programs. So the two I want to show you is the noise-induced hearing loss program and lung health and welding fumes. So the Boilermakers, what they did, this is their noise-induced hearing loss program. It starts field level promotion, educational, there's custom hearing protection, apprentice baseline audiograms. So all the apprentices that go in automatically are going to have a baseline audiogram. And then there's audiomatic testing. This is a complete program that they've implemented across Canada to ensure that young apprentices and workers are having the best noise health they can. The other thing, so this is part of how they promoted it. They brought it out. They set up partnerships with testing and audiometric testing entities across Canada. They've advertised it. It's become part of their whole program to ensure that a worker, because if you lose your hearing, it affects every aspect of your life. So they're trying to do everything they can to have good noise-induced hearing loss programs through not only at the workplace, but also in other activities that the workers do. The other thing they've done, which I think is interesting, if you look at some of the work that Paul Demir has done at the Occupational Cancer Research Center, again, funded by money from the WSIB through the Prevention Office, with some other centers of research expertise, which I'm going to talk about as partners. Welding fumes is a huge issue within construction and other industries. So what the Boilermakers did, in partnership between the University of Alberta, INSARC, and the International Boilermakers, they've actually gone into research to look at metals and breath condensate, as basically they're looking at biomarkers in welding fumes. They did this again as part with the University of Alberta. This is a study they're doing, and they're specifically looking at welding fumes and exposure to their welders. So this is part of their total worker health model to get researchers and other entities involved to look at what's happening, and then as a result of the research, to put programs in place that will transcend throughout in the workplaces. Now, what partners can assist? Now, Ontario, unlike other jurisdictions, we're blessed with various partners. We have a robust health and safety system, a system that is funded through employer premiums from the Workplace Safety Insurance Board, transferred to the Ministry of Labor through the Chief Prevention Office, and we have various entities. Sadly, a lot of people don't even know the entities I'm going to show you. So here's what makes up part of our robust health and safety infrastructure. We have HSAs. We have 4 HSAs, infrastructure, health and safety, that's specific to construction, workplace safety north, public service, and then we also have OCAL and the Workers' Health and Safety Center. In addition to this, some people may not even know we have these ones. In addition, we have centers of research expertise. Centers of expert, one is in the Institute of Work and Health that just looks at all issues related to work. Occupational Cancer Research Center. We have the Center for Research Expertise in Occupational Disease. This is for non-malignant disease. So this will be for your asthmas, other respiratory. As a matter of fact, they also do some good work on HAVs, hand-arm vibration. Center for Research Expertise and Prevention of Musculoskeletal, CREMSD. Center for Research in Occupational Safety and Health, ROSH. A newer one, we have Work Research Institute for enhancing the prevention of injury and disability at work. We also have, so the WSIB funds all these. They fund the HSAs, they fund these centers of research expertise. Additionally, in the last 8 months, there's other entities that are being funded through other research grants or as partners that can be used as partners. The problem, here's the problem. I don't think the HSAs, other than OCAL, and the Workers' Health and Safety Center are really act synergistically together. I don't think the various committees across Ontario, maybe Section 21 committees, don't utilize the Centers of Research Expertise. I know for a fact that the services of OCAL have never really been part or discussions at Construction Section 21 Committee. It's pretty, if you consider 20 deaths a year, critical injuries in construction going up every year, suicides, substance use problems, and we're not as partnering with the entities that are being paid by the system to help us. Fairly problematic, don't you think? Very problematic. Now, if we do move to this idea of changing the narrative and looking at a holistic approach, I think we could start looking at factors like workloads, stress levels, co-worker interactions, because the very centers of expertise that I just showed you could help us. The work is already done. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. It's not as if we're going to create this holistic approach to safety and we have to go create these various research entities or throw money at them. We have them. We can use the work and we can bring it into the partnership. Like I said, the Boilermakers are actually doing this, and they're a smaller trade. Before I want to leave you with some stats here. Okay. Maybe I'll ask the people in this room, how much do you think in Ontario we spend on safety? How much? Do you think we spend 30 million a year? How much the ministry spends on prevention, enforcement in Ontario a year? Laura, what do you think? More than 100 million? Less than 100 million? More? On average, since 2013, just go look at the Auditor General when she audited the Ministry of Labor program, on average $320 million a year. Okay, so let's take 2013 to 2023. It's an easy number I can do. That's around 3-point-something billion. Okay, in addition to the 3 billion, and by the way, OCAL's been part of the 3 billion, the Workers' Health and Safety Center's budget didn't get $3 billion, but this is what they're in that budget. you fund all this, the crees. Plus, we spent $3 billion a year, we spent 3 billion over 10 years, it's more. Plus all the amount of money we've rebated to workplaces. All right. Plus the research, the monies I don't know that's going to other entities. Despite all that, you would think our outcomes are really good, right? Especially in construction. Critical injuries have gone up every single year. If you look at our 6 construction rate groups, they're fantastic in LTI injuries. But if you look at no lost time injuries, they're a disaster. Why? Because all that's happening is Carmen hurts himself. It's just put him on a modified work program and he doesn't show up as a stat. We need to start changing that perspective. We need to say, hey, it's not as though we don't spend enough money. We need to retarget this money into getting the system partners to start dealing with the big issues, substance use, mental health. Doesn't mean that we need to look at some of the research being done by the system partners, OCAL, CREA-MSD, the Center for Disability, and say, hey, here's what we're noticing. Okay, maybe WSIB, maybe you need to go look at how you're dealing with entitlements. Why do I say that? Oh, well, maybe your entitlement criteria is so hard that workers aren't reporting injuries, and what they're actually doing, they're just popping pills. So they start from taking alcohol to start taking marijuana, to start going with oxycodone, then they can't get opioids, then they go into other street drugs. Now what do you have? You develop a substance use problem, but you have a musculoskeletal problem, you have a substance use problem, and all of a sudden now you have a mental health problem. Maybe if we would have a system that would say, hey, we're looking at the whole person. Compensation is one of it. We need to look at the way the benefits are processed. We need to look at the services that are available for that person. We need to look at whether there's adequate health care. We need to look at whether should it be medication that they take or should it be physio. That starts to look at a total worker health model. And I think if we do that, we'll bring some of the substance use and mental health issues down. Okay. I mean, this is the kind of things I would like people to start stimulating in your discussions. Total worker health model would also allow you to look at what type of services, what type of benefits are we providing? Do we need to increase our EAP? Should we maybe have a little bit more physio rather than just focusing on drugs? Does it mean we need to maybe have a little bit more psychological counseling? This is the kind of things, if you start looking at a holistic approach, I think we can we can have better outcomes. I think I basically done. I'll be able to take some questions if you want. I don't know if I'm actually on time or over. Oh, I'm good.
Great talk, thank you.
Oh, it's online. Oh, it's like God just spoke to me. Yeah.
One aspect of all this that we're speaking about, I find you didn't brush on very much, is the importance of the training especially with the apprentices. I was at Algonquin College. We deliver most of the training to the apprentice programs here in Ottawa area with the different trades.
Yeah.
And I see going in, seeing the lack of health and safety that we're instilling into our youngest members. We got to get these good habits instilled before the bad ones set in. Autographs, cars in the auto. with that. We got to get the training started on day one of apprenticeship training. And it's so difficult to break bad habits once they're set in. So we got to get the good habits set in. And I'd like to see some of that more into what we're doing with the younger people to keep them safe, because the younger you are, the higher the risk you are. I mean, it's been proven also.
Yeah, thanks for that. I know in the building trades, most of the trades, we do put in the health and safety. As a matter of fact, we've even gone, I think since for sure 2021, we've even gone into mental health training, substance use. And I know from the unionized trades, the ones with all the training centers like this, safety is an important part of it. But one thing that happens, unfortunately, when these people go on to the site, although they've had all the training, I think it's a little bit more than just the training. Sometimes it's who the senior person that's looking after the apprentice, the apprentice when they're on site. If the senior person or the journeyman is doing the bad habits, they automatically go. The younger person starts following about the bad habits. But I do agree with you. You need to get it. You need to get there. You need to get the safety in early. We do our best, but human nature is human nature. I think it just needs to be instilled. And I wish I had a magic solution to get everybody just to work safely on a site. I know we give the training, but that's what people do with it sometimes. That it's the leadership I talked about. Day one, the leadership is great. Day 27 of the project, when it's 3 weeks behind, the leadership's out the door. Yeah. Okay, sorry. You kicked me out.
Thank you so much, Carmen. It's a fabulous overview and lots of things to think about, and all the resources that we have, including people like Carmine. So we are going to break for lunch till 10 after 12. Please be back sharply by then. But also for those of you that are in the room, we have the Workers' Health and Safety Center table at the back with all of their information as well for training.
And just to check if there are any questions online, Katie, you do that.
We just have a couple comments about sharing resources for total worker health, as well as getting a copy of the stats referred to in the presentation. And that's all.
Great. We will do. Thanks.
This type of reconstruction is critical when occupational exposures are suspected. Various tools of the trade are available to provide historical data related to exposures within an industry or sector. There are also online tools for that. And one of our previous speakers talked about making sure that the apprentices have a baseline, and it's really important for new workers coming in to work, have that baseline exposure so that they can have proof, if you will, when they need to make claims. Hopefully not if they had to make a claim later on in life. So Megan Friesian is one of OCAL's occupational hygienists. She's been at the clinic since 2023. She holds an undergraduate degree with honors in environmental studies from the University of Ottawa and is a registered occupational hygienist since 2016. Prior to her work in the public sector, Megan worked as an occupational hygienist in the private sector for 15 years, where she specialized in industrial hygiene and risk assessments. Currently, Megan is the technical lead for the Ontario Silica Control Tool, an amazing tool. You need to use it. She possesses broad and in-depth technical knowledge on occupational exposures with a focus on asbestos and chemical agents. In addition, Megan supports professional investigations of past occupational processes and occupational exposures as part of an interdisciplinary occupational team at OCAL. And then joining her is Krista Thompson, and she's been an occupational hygienist at OCAL since 2018. She has a master's degree in occupational and environmental health from the University of Toronto and has been a registered occupational hygienist since 2010 and a Canadian registered safety professional since 2017. Prior to joining OCAL, Krista was in consulting and has experience in healthcare and the chemical, pharmaceutical, oil, and gas industries. She's an experienced speaker in the occupational hygiene field, most recently speaking. Sorry.
Most recently speaking here.
Speaking here, lost my page. Anyways, please help me welcome Megan and Krista, who will give us some really good information on silica.
Thank you.
Depends what we've been doing.
Sounds great.
Great. Well, here we are. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Laura. That was well appreciated. And I'll give it a second. I'll make sure that Kate online, if you can see my slides and you can hear me loud and clear, I will.
Yeah.
Great. I'll assume everything is good to go. And we will start into it. I'm Megan Friesen, and beside me is Krista Thompson. She'll be coming in towards the end of the presentation to talk specifically on second. I'm just trying to get to the next. There we go. On silica exposures in the past, and I'll be presenting on the other section. So presentation overview will give you a bit of a run through, another short introduction to what is silica, where is it found, what is a silica containing material. Then we'll look at how silica exposures occur. Silica itself isn't inherently dangerous. It's really the exposures that can occur at a job site or at a work site. And then we'll end with tools of the trade. So once we present you with all the scary facts, then we're going to give you solutions, tangible, usable, online, web-based solutions on how to control silica exposure. So a quick review. What is silica? Well, it is considered one of the most common minerals making up the Earth's crust. It's more commonly known as quartz. So when you hear the word or you hear about the ore or the rock known as quartz, that is silica. Silica quartz is one of the most common minerals on Earth. It is a major component naturally occurring in sand, rock, and mineral ores. And as kind of a fun fact, there are two types of silica. There's a crystalline form and a non-crystalline form. The way to go from one form to the other is by means of high heat. A perfect example of this would be, for example, glass blowing. So when silica sand is used as an When silica sand is used as an input material to creating glassworks, that sand is heated to a molten temperature, and then it is controlled and quickly cooled to create beautiful glass. And by doing that, what was once a crystalline silica product now becomes an amorphous product. And the reason for the distinction between the two is because the crystalline silica form is known to be more dangerous and more hazardous to our health. And so for the rest of the presentation, we will be focusing on the crystalline form of silica. So where is silica found? And I'll ask a rhetorical question if no one needs to shout it out unless you want to. But of all these materials on the board, they all do contain silica, but in what form and also in what percentage? And I won't make you wait in suspense for too long because I have the answers to that. Brick can contain up to 30% silica. When it comes to gravel and stone, I'm going to leave asphalt out of the mix at this point, but it will depend on the ore. It could be 10%, it could be 20%, it could be 40%. Concrete and concrete masonry structures like concrete blocks, depending on the mix, it can contain up to 50 or 60% silica. Mortar can contain up to 70% silica, actually. That's one of our higher content materials. Shifting over to artificial stone, also known as engineered stone, something that was, I believe, was originally created in the 90s, and now we see it very commonly throughout kitchen countertops and bathroom vanities. It's a manufactured product made by mixing polymer resins with high concentrations of silica, colors and pigments to kind of give it a nice look. And then it's pressed and manufactured into a product. And that can contain upwards of 95 or even 90% silica by percentage weight. Abrasives and cleaners, if workers are sandblasting, and they're using silica as their material, then it is effectively 100% silica content. Granite, also used for countertops and for bathroom vanities, naturally occurring stone, anywhere from 40 to 60% silica. And ceramic tiles, anywhere from 20 to 30% silica. Just to give you that context of these products are common. We have them in our homes and on construction sites. They're being installed. They're in new construction. They're in old construction. They're being demolished. They're being removed. They're being renovated. And these are all have the potential for exposures. So something that's interesting coming up, I find these days, is that along with population growth, there's a higher demand for building, construction, renovation, demolition, and bricks are something that are durable and can also be recycled at the end of their life. So there's this move towards taking waste clay brick, grinding it down, and reusing it as filler or aggregate. So that's a recycling technique that may or may not be used commonly on site, but that introduces a new hazard. Brick 30% silica product is now being ground on site, potentially without controls. Workers can be exposed. Or what about asphalt? Also, asphalt, quite expensive. Roads are constantly needing to be repaved and scraped down and rebuilt. And there is also seems to be a move towards milling that old asphalt and recycling it and adding binders and aggregate and also a stabilizing agent to then remake new asphalt from partially recycled asphalt. And grinding or milling that asphalt can really put workers at risk. So depending on what they're doing on a site, if they're installing new product or trying to recycle old product, there can be exposures. So in terms of respirable crystalline silica, so why are we talking about respirable? Well, respirable is a size fraction that is small enough to reach the alveoli, which are the tiny sacs of tiny sacs at the end of your bronchioles within your lungs. So your respiratory system, as displayed here, it goes from large down to very, very small. As we know, our lungs contain huge amounts of surface, all concentrated and folded on itself to be compact and stay within our chest cavity. So what happens with the respirable silica is that it's so small and it is so fine that it can penetrate deep within the bronchioles and hitting those alveoli, which then react because they don't like this nuisance dust coming at it. And it will start to form nodules or scarring as that silica dust reaches it. So over time, there's an increased amount of scars or nodules that are forming. And this can lead to lung damage, shortness of breath. The lung tissue itself becomes less elastic, and we need our lungs to be able to inhale, and as we exhale, moves a lot like a balloon. So the reality is that when the lung is compromised, it really can affect the entire body. And so here's a video. It's only 2 minutes long, created by WorkSafe BC, that really will depict the visualization of what I just described.
Silica. It's one of the most common substances on Earth. It can be found in materials like sand and rock, and building products like concrete and brick. When a worker cuts, grinds, or drills materials that contain silica, dangerous crystalline silica dust is released into the air. As the worker breathes, silica crystals flow into his mouth and nose and down the air passages deep into the lungs. The tiny crystals enter the small, fragile air sacs, where oxygen is absorbed into the blood. Immune system cells, called macrophages, engulf and try to dissolve the crystals, but they are unable to. Over time, more and more crystals build up inside the macrophage cells. The macrophages carry the silica into the walls of the lung, where they die. Scar tissue forms around the dead cells and spreads as more cells die. This damage can continue even after the exposure to silica stops. Eventually, so much scar tissue forms that the lungs can no longer function. For information on how to protect yourself from silica exposure, visit WorksafeBC.com.
So as we saw in that video, what I described in words prior to this slide, it's a really good video. It really drives the point home on how silica dust damages our lungs. So let's move on to how silica exposures occur. And you're going to see quite a big push on construction type activities. And the reason for that is the construction industry, especially in Ontario, accounts for between 50 and 60% of workers exposed to silica dust, just simply due to activities being done in construction sites. So these exposures occur when the crystalline silica dust is produced when a silica containing material is damaged, whether it's being, there's digging and blasting occurring, if it's polishing, cutting, grinding, coring, scarring, carving, breaking, or sawing. These are all activities that will create some level of dust, some more than others, and that can lead to exposure to that worker or workers that are nearby, adjacent workers. So let's give you some tangible examples. These exposures occur when you have an electrician who's coring through a concrete deck to run new conduits or new fiber internet cables. These exposures occur when you have a carpenter who's asked to cut fiber cement board to use as a roofing underlay for a building. These exposures occur when you have a plumber who is sent to someone's house or a building and is chipping or jackhammering out a concrete floor to access pipes that are buried under that concrete. These exposures occur when a laborer is asked to use a hand grinder to grind off leftover mortar and grout as they're replacing ceramic tiles at an airport, something that I've seen recently. And keeping in mind that often we will see dust is people rely on that visual aspect of seeing the dust to then be aware of the dust. But because silica is so dangerous in a very small respirable fraction, that respirable fraction is technically invisible. So by the time you are seeing even a little bit of a dust, there is that potential for the worker to have already been overexposed to silica. Now, what are the symptoms? Well, as one can imagine, the common symptoms, coughing, severe coughing, because your lungs are being disproportionately affected. You can end up with workers with shortness of breath, general body weakness, chest pain as well. And these symptoms are really indicative of what's happening inside on an internal fashion. It's your lung that is now suffering from inflammation because of the damage, and also lung fibrosis. That is the more permanent form of damage that occurs with as the delicate tissues are suffering and creating those scarring and those nodules. Now let's take a look at the health effects. Well, The most notable examples of health effects that workers suffer as a result of exposure to silica is lung cancer and silicosis. Lung cancer, there's an estimate of about 200 lung cancer cases diagnosed per year in Ontario alone, either directly related or indirectly related to silica exposure. Silicosis, its name is taken directly from the word silica because it is an incurable lung disease characterized by the progressive scarring, thickening, and the hardening of the lung. It's marked by shortness of breath and impaired lung function, and there are different grades of, I'll say, silicosis. There is chronic silicosis has been more typical in the past. It occurs 10, 15, 20 years after initial exposure, and then that worker works in an industry where they're exposed often on a daily basis, and it becomes a long latency type of illness diagnosis. However, acute silicosis can occur in a much shorter time period, sometimes even as little as a few months, if we're talking about very high exposures that worker is suffering, and they can be diagnosed fairly quickly as a result. Some industries that have high exposures would be like the kitchen countertop manufacturing, vanity countertop manufacturings, and they can often have very high exposures as a result of the processes that are needed to produce and manufacture and then distribute those products. And as we saw in the video, silicosis can continue to progress even after workplace exposures have stopped. Other illnesses associated with silica exposure include chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. Idiopathic is simply another way of saying of unknown cause. Chronic kidney disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and a few others here, scleroderma, which is an autoimmune disease, which causes the thickening of the skin and inflammation of joints and tendons within the body. There's also sarcoidosis, an inflammatory disease, and when very high exposures have occurred and the worker ends up with accidental ingestion, it has been linked to esophageal cancer and gastric cancer as well. So let's take a look at silica in the news, because some of you may have seen this come across the news feed. And so in reality, let's give you some, so in California, over the past 5 to 6 years, they have adopted new safety standards very recently for those working with artificial and engineered stone as a result of several hundred silicosis cases that were discovered within that industry. Most of these workers who were diagnosed with silicosis were in their 30s and their 40s, so relatively young. And several have passed away, and others are living on oxygen until and waiting for a lung transplant because they are in such dire need of that type of medical intervention. Australia in July of 2024, I believe, has become the first country to ban the use, the supply, and the manufacturing of engineered or artificial stone. This ban was instigated as a way to reduce the incidence of silicosis, which was occurring in Australia and was disproportionately affecting workers in the engineered stone industry. And just recently, the United Kingdom's Health and Safety Executive has published new guidance for workers who cut or work with engineered stone countertops. This is certainly seems to be a reoccurring theme, although at this point in time in Ontario, it isn't clear or apparent that silicosis is on the rise. It is a lung disease that can be difficult to diagnose if there's earlier onset in younger workers, because there are a lot of different illnesses that are associated with cough, shortness of breath, and chest pain. As you can imagine, it can be difficult to get the right diagnosis at times. Sometimes they'll get a diagnosis like pulmonary fibrosis or idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis because there's not much else for the doctor to go on. So what I found the most apparent about this is that workers, when they go in to see their doctor, it's good for them to be able to name their occupation and then say, I work with A, B, C, D. And maybe that's concrete with silica, or maybe it's asbestos. They need to be able to tell their doctor this so that it'll shift their focus and help them narrow down out of potentially 50 or 100 illnesses the doctor may be considering. It will shift it towards, could it be occupationally related? Now, which workers are most effective? Well, It is across Canada. It's really construction. Construction is top of the list. Not to say that manufacturing or mining and oil and gas don't also suffer from exposures as well as elevated exposures. It's because the construction industry just makes up such a huge proportion of people. In fact, in Ontario, the construction industry, I believe, employs between 7 and 8% of the workforce, which is really high. That's really quite high as compared to mining, which is more like 0.5% of the workforce. So construction just has a huge volume of workers in all the different skilled trades. And it's well known that in Ontario, we're losing skilled trades as people retire. And what we're going to need within the next decade, as I've seen publicized, is that over the next 10 years, Ontario is going to need about 500,000 new workers to fill job openings within the skilled trades related occupation, which is a huge number of people because we have population growth and it's the economy moving forward. So all of those workers, we're going to have new workers coming in, young workers, and we need to keep them in mind as part of protection from both injuries and illnesses. Now, a little bit more exposure data, because I do love my data. So these are slightly old numbers. So I would venture to guess that more like 500,000 Canadian workers are exposed to silica on a day-to-day basis in their occupation. That translates down into Ontario, about 150,000 workers are exposed. And again, with construction being the largest single exposed sector, let's take a look. Construction trade laborers are estimated to have around 135,000 workers exposed to silica. Heavy equipment operators are sitting at around 46,000 workers exposed. Then we have plasterers and drywallers are sitting at around 30,000 workers exposed, and plumbers are sitting right around 25,000 workers exposed. So we can expect these numbers to rise also as more workers enter the construction industry. Here's where I will pass it over to Krista, and she will give you a breakdown of how to look at silica exposures in the past.
Okay, so I'm just going to talk a bit about occupational cancers just to set the framework. So Ontario had about 95,000 cancer cases diagnosed. This is 2022 data. The Occupational Cancer Research Center published data in 2020 that found the 16 most common occupational carcinogens caused about 3,000 cancers per year in Ontario. So, and that's not 2020 data, that's looking at several years and putting out an average. The Workplace Safety and Insurance Board published a report in 2020 that showed that there was an average of approximately 400 occupational cancer claims submitted per year. So there's a big gap in claim submissions, and of those claims, an average of 170 occupational claims accepted. So we have gaps here between the claims and the submission, or sorry, the number of cases and then the claims being submitted. We have massive gaps because a lot of people aren't even necessarily aware that that was what caused their occupational cancer. Okay, so the cancer claims rate is 2.9 per 100,000 workers. This is, so that's the top 16 most common occupational carcinogens, but the top 5 I just wanted to share with you. So number 1 is solar radiation, so the sun. Number 2 is still asbestos, mostly from exposures in the past, but we know that those exposures are still occurring today. Diesel engine exhaust, which isn't always well recognized as a carcinogen, it is a carcinogen, and that is in the top 5. Silica, respirable crystalline silica is in that top 5 list. And then rounding out the top 5, we have welding fumes. So we have a lot of cancer exposures in Ontario, a lot of occupational cancers, and a lot of occupational diseases. So how would someone like Megan or myself as an occupational hygienist look at someone's past exposures? We're going to start with finding out a worker's job titles and the dates. When a worker comes to OCAL, hopefully we do get a chance to interview the worker. Sometimes it is the family coming to us because their family member is too ill, or very sadly, sometimes they're already deceased. So in those cases, we might talk to the family members. We might even find some retired coworkers. We'll find out what the jobs were and the approximate time periods they held those jobs. When we're lucky, we look at past job descriptions. The reason we want past job descriptions is jobs change over time. So we want to look at how was this job defined in the past. And there are sometimes cases where we can find these. Unions are a fabulous resource for this because unions will often save past job descriptions every 5 or 10 years. And then they can hand them to us and say, this is what the job description was. You know, the worker worked from 1970 onwards and we have a job description from 1980. That's going to be a better job description than a 2025 one. We're also going to look at process descriptions. This is describing the tools, so maybe looking at machinery that was used. This is looking at the materials used and how the workers might have interacted with these. This can be in the job description. It can also be from talking to the worker or their coworkers. And then workplace conditions. So how was the ventilation? Was there ventilation? Could you see across the room? Was there personal protective equipment worn? We're going to look at all these factors to have an understanding of what the worker did and what they might have been exposed to. We might even ask what processes were in the area that you didn't work with, but were in your area that would impact your exposure. We're also going to take a look at if there is actual occupational hygiene data. So when we are lucky, we get a report from company ABC that does monitoring of that job in that time period. And our best source for this is from the unions. So what many unions do, not all, but hopefully I can spread the word and get more to do this, is they'll save the occupational hygiene reports, sometimes called industrial hygiene reports. They'll save that exposure data in 2 places. 1, they'll save a copy for their internal records. And 2, they'll log it in the Joint Health and Safety Committee minutes. Those are 2 great spots where we have found past occupational hygiene reports. So that will tell us, okay, Joe worked in this department. Here's the monitoring from this department in the same time frame. Great. That's wonderful. That doesn't happen as often as we'd like, but it sure is nice when it happens. So we'll also take a look at other sources. So there are a couple of Ontario-specific databases of ministry-produced occupational hygiene data. We will look there. We'll also look at the peer-reviewed published hygiene literature. So by peer-reviewed, we mean things that have been put in scientific journals. So some of the journals that we really like are the American Journal of Industrial Medicine, the Journal of Occupational and Environmental Hygiene, the International Journal of Occupational Environmental Health, but there's a number of others we'll take a look at. Okay, so this is data that's been validated by scientists that tells us a welder working in the 1970s in oil and gas might have had this range of exposures. And we will acknowledge it may not be exactly what our workers' exposures were, but it's the same time frame, it's the same job description, it's probably close. Then our final source that we look at are white papers. So these are things that have been published by NIOSH, IRSST, WorkSafe BC. There's a number of places. Europe has a lot of things published. So they're not independently validated by a peer review process, but they're reputable organizations that are publishing very good data. This is where we look at to find out what this welder's exposures or whatever the job description is might have been in the past. And we can usually find data between one or all of these sources. Obviously the top one, sort of our top tier, but we will use whatever we can. I think we're kind of like detectives in that way, trying to find these exposures in the past. So I just wanted to briefly do a quick case study looking at silicosis and chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, or COPD. So this is a case study of a worker. We're going to call the worker Sam. He was diagnosed with silicosis and COPD. So we took a look at when he worked. He worked from 1970 to 2010. He worked as an equipment operator for 10 of those years, and he worked as a miner for 30 years. We found that his exposures, based on his job descriptions and the tasks he had, resulted in exposures to wood dust, respirable dust, nickel, respirable crystalline silica, diesel exhaust, among many other things. But these are what we focused on because these are the ones that have exposures that are associated with increased risk of his diseases. So it is I mean, Megan talked about silica and silicosis. That's a causal relationship, boom, right there. But for COPD, it's a little more complex because there isn't the same causation relationship, but what there is in the literature are statistically significant, so that means scientists trust it, increased risks of COPD for individuals with respirable crystalline silica and wood dust. So when previously a claim might look at just the respirable crystalline silica and find that exposure to silica that Sam had is not enough to increase the risk of COPD based on epidemiology data. But when you add in the wood dust, right, you have to look at all the exposures together because your body is not going to process, oh, silica, it hurts our lungs, but don't worry about it, the other things that hurt our lungs, because we're going to compartmentalize wood dust. Our body doesn't work that way. Our body's a whole system. It processes all the things that hurt our lungs, processes them together. So we're going to add up that exposure to the respirable crystalline silica and wood dust. Based on that, we found that the combined risk is higher than was initially thought. So we submitted information to support that claim. And for those of you who know how OCAL works, we produce a report discussing the risks, discussing the increased risk factors, and demonstrating how we've calculated that to support whether it's an appeal or going to WSIAT. I'm going to turn it back over to Megan now.
So here, the hierarchy of controls. This is the third time you've seen it today. Promise it will be your last.
Not last in your life.
No, definitely not. You will want to print a copy and tape it to your wall next to you so you can refer to it at all times. Because it really does, it goes to show the fact that you've seen this 3 times today. Total worker health, this applies. Musculoskeletal disorders, this applies. Occupational illnesses, this applies. So how do we remove the hazard? In this case, silica. Can we take it out of the equation? Can we substitute it with something less dangerous? Can we install local exhaust ventilation? Or can we isolate the work area or the worker so they don't get exposed? Administrative controls would be training, SOPs, and training, just training, informing the workers, especially young workers that are going through college and they're learning a trade, and and health and safety is not at the forefront sometimes. They're excited to get their hours and they're excited to make money. But let's find the opportunity to showcase some of the risks that are associated with doing their job or being on a construction job site at all. And last but not least, of course, personal protective equipment. It has its place, but let's save that for the end. Let's use that as our last resort and consider these other options first. Tools of the trade. I'm going to give you a brief overview on these 4 different tools. The first one is focused on silica, but the other 3, silica is included, but it also focuses on other known carcinogens. So the silica control tool, there are ways to register for it. You do need an account to use it. It's available to all workers and employers within Ontario. I know that there are some people on this call that are from outside the province. Don't hesitate. You can make if you click the register with OCAL button, trial accounts will be provided so that you can take a look at this online tool as well. And how does it work? I wouldn't have time to show you all 20 or 30 pages of running through it, but it's pretty great. It's fueled and it's run by real data, over 5,000, maybe even 6,000 real sampling data points collected and organized and submitted into the tool in the background. It prompts you with easy drop-down menus to make a selection on what you or your worker might be doing as far as a silica containing a material task, and then it will provide you with information how to reduce that exposure, and it will also provide you with a real estimate, an estimated concentration of silica dust that worker may be exposed to. The Occupational Exposure Limits Adjustment Tool, we call that the OEL tool for short. What's nice about this is it's a tool created by OCAL and hosted on our website, but it's simply an Excel spreadsheet that you click on, download to your computer, and you could use it anywhere, anytime. And what it looks like is this. There are actually 3 simple steps. Step 1, if you follow the little green circles, is you select a substance. There's a drop-down menu here. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of materials to select from. I have selected crystalline silica quartz triply. Number 2, there are 2 boxes here, daily schedule. So what are the anticipated work hours for your worker or for yourself that you'll be working within a day? I've put 12, and then you just need to also put in the weekly schedule. Maybe that worker only works 3 days a week or 4 days a week. So if it's 4 days a week, it's 12 times 4, we have 48, and that's it. You hit enter and you scroll over to the right-hand side under results, and you'll have an adjusted time-weighted average that you can now compare to Ontario's occupational exposure limits for that worker's adjusted time schedule, because not everyone works 8 hours a day and 40 hours a week, and that is upon which Ontario OELs are based. Here is another online option. It's called eWork. It's hosted by CarX Canada. And what it does is it lets you select, make 3 selections. You can select by province, you can select by carcinogen, and you can select by industry. And I'll show you an example of what that looks like on the next page. So here is an industry breakdown. I had selected construction as my industry of interest, and then you can select from the list which carcinogen is of interest. And what it does here is using NAIC codes under the industry section here, it provides you with data on which workers are the most exposed by total numbers, male, female, and also exposure level. So looking at building finishing contractors, we have a total number. And if it's of interest, also how many are exposed to low concentrations, moderate, or high concentrations. And what I find interesting here, and it's not a surprise in the construction industry, high exposures are occurring. Some moderate, few moderate, and a few low, but really it's high exposures tend to be the norm. And you can scroll down here and look at the other trades within this industry, and it'll provide you with the numbers as per the database. And lastly, we have Ontario's Occupational Disease Statistics as hosted by OCRC, the Occupational Cancer Research Centre. You have a bit fewer selections. Your sectors that you can choose from are the 9 that are listed here, construction down to transportation. And exposures, the list is a bit shorter as well. The CarX tool lets you choose from several dozen, but in this case, it is the top 10 agents within as identified by OCRC. And so what's nice about this is that it will provide you with, and I hope that's not too small, no, that's all right. It will provide you, when you make your selections, either by sector or by your carcinogen or agent of interest, it will provide you with a 1-page downloadable PDF with great graphics, and it provides you with quick numbers and values and percentages that you can use. And this is something that I could see being shared with workers, posted on job boards, or even trained to. So if we look at the I'll call it the poster on the left-hand side, we selected the construction sector, and it's going to tell us lots of things, key results within the occupational disease surveillance program, which accounts for, there's a lot of data somewhere behind here as you're making your selection. There is as part of the ODSS, there are 2.4 million Ontario workers that are being followed across their employment time within Ontario. And that data is being populated and put in somewhere and is allowing us to search this information. So you can see the top risks of occupational illnesses for workers in construction. And as you can see here, it is broken down by graders and pavers, insulators, pipe fitters and plumbers, but it'll show you information that maybe we hadn't considered. Asbestosis is top on the list here for pipe fitters and plumbers. That doesn't surprise me, but it may surprise someone who's trying to do some risk assessment planning for the plumbing trade that they're working within. And on the right-hand side, we have what a poster looks like if you select silica, or one of the carcinogens. And so it provides you with, under key results, again, it is grouped by types of industry, but mining, you have silicosis right at the top of that list, followed closely by idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, COPD, and lung cancer. Not a surprise to anyone, but when it comes to silica exposure, it gives you groupings here, then iron foundries, metal processing, and then the construction trade. So what is great about this is that there's a ton of data in here, not that we can see it, but it's in the background running, and it can give you that opportunity to learn something quickly and relatively easily about different trades and different sectors within Ontario and what their top occupational illness risks really are. So that was good timing, and now I will open it for questions.
Yeah, so I think it was, I'm just trying to figure out who it was that was, like, my apologies, Megan and Krista, buddy. And yeah, 'cause I'm not sure. So you had a chart up and you were talking about COPD and you were talking about silicosis and you were talking about a report that was submitted. So the question was, I'm assuming that was a request that came in respect to a claim that had been submitted. So the question then is, what ended up happening with that? So was that accepted in respect to the claim, or how did that work out?
So is this picking me up? Or shut the door? Okay. An advocate or a union. We have not got the feedback back from that. We did feel that the literal evidence was very strong. So we hope that we produced a report that will help the advocate with that appeal. What I can't remember if it was at the appeals resolution stage or if it was at the WYSIAT stage. If you know the system, you go through multiple appeal levels, basically. Okay.
I'm wondering what's in it. How do you dispose of silica sand? Like I had a large bag with my garage 25 years ago. I used to sandblast trailer frames.
Typically, it's not considered a hazardous waste.
Okay.
Unlike asbestos. So most of the time it can just go to general landfill. It is only hazardous when it's made airborne. So if you're pouring it and you get the airborne, so when it's sealed, it's not. Best place to find that out is to just check with your municipality.
Sure.
If they accept silica, but generally it's not hazardous.
I knew it was dangerous in some ways. That's why it's.
Yes. So when you make it, so when you go to pour it, if you're not wearing a respirator, you might get a short-term but very, very high exposure. So that is why we have the respirator recommendations, the engineering controls. But in terms of a product just sitting there, it's not hazardous. The same as like bricks on the wall. Like once the brick's made, if you're not doing anything to the brick, it's not hazardous. It's only when you are either making it or filing it or working on it in some mechanical way. Yeah, good question. Thanks. We got one online.
Yes, the question online is they've been curious about glass blowers who work with quartz glass. Would there be any danger for exposure to silica there?
Have like a sand, like is it quartz sand or is it a quartz glass that's already been made into glass that they're just reheating? If it is a quartz glass that is already in glass form and they are heating it to reshape it, which a lot of glass blowers do, that's not hazardous. It's when you had the fine quartz that can be it. So glass heating, that's not a hazardous use. That's why silica is so complicated, because it's hazardous in some forms and not hazardous in others. So I'd say if anyone has any, because we're going to be kicked off soon, but if anyone has any other questions, you can reach out to OCAL. We would be happy to help anyone sort out if their silica is a hazard or help them in any other ways.
We're not kicking you off. We actually wanted to extend the Q&A a minute for you and Carmen and any other speakers that are online, just because we, come on up, Carmen, if you like. We wanted to just have a panel on the fly here at the end because we missed, we kind of didn't get the time we wanted for everyone. So we thought we'd take a few minutes now that we caught up and open the floor for the panel for those available. If there are questions for any of our speakers today.
We do have another one online. Is the silica tool a task-based calculator, or can it be used for a specific silica generating process?
It is both, because the way that it calculates, it creates an estimated exposure concentration, is it will ask you task-based questions. There are 7 drop-down menus. So it's going to prompt you with templated examples that can be used. There are 15 different silica containing materials on the list. And then it'll ask you, how is it being done? Are you coring, grinding, scarifying the concrete? What tool are you using? And then for how long are you doing the work? And also, is it indoor, outdoor, or within a restricted work area? And it'll provide you with that estimated concentration based on actual data that's been collected in that exact scenario. I hope that answered that question. Yeah, any other questions, Kate, for ourselves or for Carmen?
There's none currently. If anybody has any other questions, please put them into the chat and our speakers can answer them for you.
Any in the audience before we move on to have David catch us up on his now closing remarks?
Thank you for coming up.
Okay, we didn't put you between lunch and we still got you quiet at the end. So, Mr. David Chesney, our chair and president and chair, would you like to say a few closing remarks now that we missed you at our welcoming?
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, wonderfully.
Awesome. Well, it actually maybe works out a little better that I do some closing remarks, because usually I would say in the opening remarks, thanks to everybody and looking forward to a great morning and afternoon of speakers. But now I can say that, wow, being here and listening to everybody throughout the morning and into the afternoon, there is so much information that we've just been given that I want to reiterate what Kimberly said at the opening, is that this is an exchange, an ability for you to have an exchange of materials, information. But if you keep them in your pockets, in your back pockets, in your filing cabinets, or in your computers, it really doesn't do any good. So what I would encourage everybody to do is to take the information that you've gotten today. I encourage you to ask any further questions, either online or approach any of our staff at the clinic or clinics, depending upon where you're situated. We have 7 clinics throughout Ontario. There's always a clinic close to you. You can look us up online at www.ohcow.on.ca, and maybe Kate, you can put that into the chat for everybody. But it's a wonderful resource, and I want to thank all of the presenters, both staff and from outside, the OCOW world. Carmine, some great words of encouragement. I think that we realize that with what we've learned today, there's lots of work ahead, whether we're an advocate, whether we're staff, whether we're workers that are injured ourselves. It's not something that we want to experience, but once we've experienced it, it's great to know that we have a resource like OCOW that folks can turn to, rely on, and even help with. And one of the things that we do is have referrals made to us either by yourselves personally, through your advocates, your unions, or what have you, or through knowledge transfers such as, webinars and seminars that we do constantly, whether it's our repetitive strain injury plus days, whether it's our May Day, whether it's, our October events that we stress the occupational disease issues. It's just always amazing to me of what, and Carmine referred to us as, a relatively small organization in the big scheme of the prevention branch of the ministry, that we have so much information, so many qualified staff to be able to give you all of this information today, that we're small but mighty. I keep saying that to anybody I walk into or work with because of the fact that for such a small organization, we do produce so many great tools, whether it's our tools that you can put on your phone by way of apps, whether it's visiting our website. There's no way in half your lifetime you could probably read everything that's on and review everything and view everything that's on our website, but I do encourage you to go to that website. There are events such as this today that have the recorded events that you can go to, as well as all the tools and as well as all of the other print material that you can download. So again, take this with you, take it out, spread it widely, don't hog it, don't stick it away in a corner, don't let it collect dust, use it to your advantage. And then I guess lastly, I want to thank all the staff that helped today, Kimberly and Kate, and I'm going to forget everybody else. I just won't name everybody else, let's put it that way. But thanks to everybody behind the scenes, Cheryl, our client service coordinator, who helped put all this together. And also thanks greatly to our local outreach committee, headed up by your chair, Laura Lozansky, who you met at the beginning of today, and to Sean and company at the Ottawa District Labour Council, who partnered with us today to put this event on. I think it was a great day for you to learn, to get new information. And I guess lastly, just again, take it with you, spread it widely, and if you need more, don't hesitate to ask. So thanks, Kimberly, thanks, Laura, thanks, Sean, and back over to you.
Thank you, David. And I just have one administrative item and handing it over to Sean and Laura to close us out here today. We had a little incent to get people to come in person today. Although we got many more virtually. We have a draw for a chili mousse cooler now that, again, we're planting the seeds and summer's coming. And the winner is a Jacob Mallet of the Chili Moose cooler. So I just wanted to mention that. For those of you thinking about next year, and that it's just behind us, Jacob, so you can see Cheryl. For those of you thinking about next year, you might want to come in person for the special prize. So I'll hand it over to Sean and Laura now with great thanks.
Thank you, Kimberly. And again, thank you to all of our guest speakers for coming today. Some from far away, some from close around, and those that spoke online as well. But we really appreciate the work that the OCO staff does, because without that, workers are not the better for it, but they are the better for it because of the work that they do. So we remind you again about doing the feedback forms. And I'd also like to take a moment to remind you that the Workers' Health and Safety Center is our sister organization. They do the training. So the things that you learned about today, they have a course for each one of those hazards spoken about today. Please reach out to, in your region, to your local Workers' Health and Safety Center rep and have that training done. And again, thank you. And I'd like to thank Sean and the Ottawa District Labour Council and all of our team that helped put this on together through the LOC. Sean?
You can stay there. Okay. We're both there.
Okay.
So thank you, Laura, and thank you to everybody online, and thank you to everybody that's in the audience here that have participated. Part of what we use this for, the closing, is to talk about very briefly the importance of April 28th, the day of mourning, and encourage participation. Again, those that are online, those that are here to participate in your respective areas. Labor councils primarily are the focal point in respect to the ceremonies that are taking place. Our event starts at 12:30. It's not a long event. It's one of the largest in the country. Sometimes we attract up to about 500 people at our event. Last year, we had the mother of a kid who was 20. And so in April 28th, 2024, the mother of a kid who was 20 who got electrocuted the year before, trimming a hedge. And so she came, and her husband was there, and they have another son as well who was there. Jennifer Chenier is the mother's name, and very passionate. And I got to know her really, really well. Now, the interesting thing about that, why I flag it, is because last year the police laid a charge of criminal negligence causing death against the the supervisor of a company called Best Green Hedges here in Ottawa, and it was the first such charge in Eastern Ontario that had ever taken place, of course, as a result of Westray, and David Meinzinger from the Steelworkers is here today, and we're talking about it earlier on, the importance of Westray. So again, I can't flag enough the importance of the day of mourning. It's a shame that we have to have a day like that to remember those workers who were killed and injured, and all of us that are participating here will go through it in one way or another. And that is, we'll talk about the 1,000 or so workers that have died as a direct result of the workplace over the last year, and how we hope things are going to get better. But it's through organizations like OCAL and the individuals, the passionate individuals that are involved in OCAL and other health and safety organizations that we hope one day that maybe we won't have so many worker fatalities and injuries across this great country of ours. So thank you, everybody.
If anybody wants any further information or has any questions or wants to get in contact with any of our guest speakers, please just contact OCAL and somebody will be happy to assist you with that. Goodbye. Have a wonderful rest of your day and safe weekend.